IB Nation, welcome back to another episode of the Irish Breakdown Podcast brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook. And today, it is Wednesday. We are halfway through game week. Notre Dame kicks off this Saturday at 3:30 p.m. inside of Notre Dame Stadium for the first time in program history against the Boise State Broncos. Sean, I'm excited for this one. I'll be back up on campus. Are you able to make it up to campus this weekend, Sean? Are you?
No, man, I have to take a CPR class this weekend, so I won't be able to make it. I have some other things to do, so I think I won't be up there until USC.
Okay, right on.
Yeah.
All right, well, I'll be up there then too, so we'll definitely link up for the USC game. Well, you're busy learning how to save lives with CPR. I will be up on campus this weekend, and for the first time in program history, Notre Dame will be hosting the Boise State Broncos, and I am extremely excited to watch this matchup unfold. One, it's very rare when you follow a team like Notre Dame. There's firsts in program history, and over the last couple of seasons, it feels like we've been able to experience a lot of that. First ever home playoff game, in college football history was at Notre Dame's campus. I was, fortunate enough to be able to go to that game. They played Arkansas for the first time in program history last week, and then they play Boise State at home this week. So this is going to be an exciting one. But, Sean, that means that we have a lot to break down here on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Today, we're going to be breaking down two different aspects of this game. One, we're going to be talking Notre Dame offense versus the Boise State defense. Part two of today's show, we're going to flip the script. We're going to talk some Notre Dame defense versus the Boise State offense. In that, we're talking big picture, what's at stake for the offense, what's at stake for the defense, areas where Notre Dame matches up well, players that have to show out in this game, and it's all for different reasons. But, Sean, this is going to be an exciting matchup to talk about and one that I'm excited to watch unfold on Saturday. But at the end of the day, Notre Dame plays football on Saturday. I'm in a good mood, Sean. How you doing today, man?
I'm in a great mood, ready to talk about this game, ready to turn the page. Second leg of the four most important games of the season, in my opinion, after losing the first two and trying to build to a possible playoff berth. So I think this, we'll get into it, but I think out of the four games, because of styles, this gives Notre Dame a different challenge to face than the other three games. I think this is the stylistic game that will be different than the other three teams in this four-game stretch for the Fighting Irish.
No, I agree completely. And also, we are going to have a mailbag at the end of today's show. So get your questions and comments in throughout the show. We'll get those set aside, and we'll get to those at the very end. But, Sean, when we start talking about this matchup, let's start on offense. This has been the side of the ball for Notre Dame that has really been, I don't want to say a surprise because, we've talked a lot in the offseason. We've been talking throughout the season that we knew how good this offense could potentially be. I think the shocking aspect is how quickly they got up to speed, especially with, redshirt freshman quarterback, new starting right guard. But then there's been some areas of this offense that haven't been a surprise. I don't think anybody's surprised that Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price look the way that they do. If you watch Malachi Fields at Virginia, you're not really surprised at what he's doing so far in the blue and gold. There's just people like me who had to see it happen first with him wearing a golden dome. You know what I mean? So, this offense has an interesting task ahead of them when you look at this Boise State defense. Now, at the end of the day, the best way that I can put it is I think this is strength versus struggle. The strength is Notre Dame's offense, and Boise State's defense has definitely not been the strength of their team. Slowly becoming a common theme of some of these opponents that we've been talking about here, Sean. Very slowly. I think that's going to be interesting, especially over this four-game stretch. When you look at Arkansas, Boise State, NC State, and USC, you could make the argument that all of these have the potential to be a shootout. Now, we obviously know what happened with Arkansas last week, but, really for the next couple of weeks up until Notre Dame's bye, this is going to be the conversation, and that puts this Notre Dame offense in a little bit of a different spot. But when you start looking at the numbers here, Sean, I'll get these pulled up here real quick. When you look at the numbers of comparing Notre Dame's offense versus Boise State's defense, Notre Dame has some clear-cut advantages in certain areas. And I'm not just talking big picture, points per game or yards per game. In some of the areas that count, Boise State has allowed some pretty explosive plays. They've allowed 5 runs of 20 yards or more, which ranks 67th in the country. And they've allowed 8 completions of 30 yards or more, which ranks 109th in the country. That doesn't really fare well when the offense that they're getting ready to go up against has 10 completions on the season so far of 30 yards or more. Notre Dame ranks 16th in the country in that category. The one that's kind of shocking is they only have, 6 runs of 20 yards or more in the season. But Sean, when you take a look at these numbers, big picture, what are some of the things that stand out to you?
Like I said, this is going to be a different style of fight for Notre Dame. One of the things that is probably not on here is that their sack rate, which is like 1 out of every 8 dropbacks. They're coming up with a sack because they like to bring pressure. And that's something, that Notre Dame and this offensive line, I like this matchup for this offensive line because I think they face defensive lines that are bigger, but not exactly as fast and quick. And I think quickness has been the problem. Defensive lines that are able to get upfield in between the gaps, make quick penetration. That's really been the issue when it comes to what they face against Texas A&M and what they face against Miami. So we're talking about Purdue and Arkansas. Their defensive lines were really tailor-made to kind of remedy the problems that existed on the Notre Dame offensive line. This group right here defensively and what they like to do, which is be solid against the run. They're 81st in the nation, but they don't have a lot up front. But they're tough-minded. They play hard, and if they can just get you to third down, now they get into their pressure packages, and that's really where they can make hay. So I think that's something that they're going to try to do, and they're going to try to play complementary football this week and take. When's the last time we heard a team is going to try to keep the Notre Dame offense off the field? That's where we're at, Fighting Irish fans. We're in the place where teams are going to face Notre Dame, and they're going to come into that game trying to slow the game down and keep the Notre Dame offense off the field. So I think that's something from a style we're going to see this weekend. And defensively, I just think, what they offer, 42nd. Now, I will say this, 42nd in passing yards. That's pretty decent. And I think it poses a challenge that this is the best pass defense that they'll face for the remainder of the season. This is it. And if they come out and put up points against this pass defense with this pressure package, man, the rest of the schedule, they might light it up like we've never seen before. Like we've been saying, you would expect they would have an off day. Will they? With the past defenses they're going to be facing on the remainder of the schedule, we'll see. But I just really think more than anything, this is a game where Boise State is going to have to come up with some big plays and hope that the ball bounces their way and hope they can take advantage of a mistake or two by the freshman quarterback, CJ Carr, and just hang around and apply pressure and apply game pressure to Notre Dame. And I think in that stead, they're going to have to do a lot. I think the pressure packages are going to be very interesting, especially on first down. I want to see if they're going to go against the trend of what they do on third down and start using it on some earlier downs, on first and second down, specifically to try and, confuse the blocking in the run game. I'm very interested in seeing what they have underneath their hat as they come into Notre Dame Stadium.
I think this is a really interesting matchup, to your point, Sean, about when you look at what the numbers have been for the Boise State defense. Because I'd make the argument that they're a little bit tough to gauge. Big picture, you look at the number, 42nd in the country, only allowing 185.5 passing yards a game. That's not too bad. But I think when you dive into who they've played, it sheds a little bit more light on the topic. One of the teams they played was a triple option team. But here's the weird thing about that. Air Force passed for the second most yards against this defense than they've allowed all season. Air Force passed for 246 yards, averaged 12.3 yards a pass. I thought that was a little interesting. I think their numbers were helped out a little bit when they played Appalachian State, who's just not good this year. They had 65 passing yards. And then when they played Eastern Washington had 176. But when they played South Florida, they allowed 256 passing yards. So this is just it's a defense that it's hard to gauge truly where they're at because they haven't faced the level of a passing offense that Notre Dame brings to the table. 16th in the country in yards a game, 5th in the country in yards per attempt, 6th in the country in yards per completion. CJ Carr's done a good job, especially removed from the first two games. He's done a really good job of taking care of the football, 8th in the country in quarterback rating. And then, like we've talked about, 16th in the country in completions of over 30 yards. So this is going to be a big test for both teams, like you said, but it's going to look different. If I'm being 100% honest, I'm not too worried about the Boise State secondary as a unit. I'm more concerned around the pressure packages that they're going to bring. Because the weird thing, we talked about this yesterday, Sean. Brian brought up a good point. It was interesting that with Notre Dame having a redshirt freshman quarterback, that Arkansas and Purdue didn't try to pressure him more throughout the game than what they really failed to attempt to do. Boise State is not going to have that issue of not wanting to bring pressure because they understand their personnel. And that's where they thrive. I think that's one of the reasons why they rank 38th in the country in sacks. They rank 38th in the country in sacks with 11 on the season, but, their two main defensive linemen, Braxton Feely and Jaden Vergen-Morgan, have combined, I think, for 5 of them. And so this is a team that likes to bring pressure. They like to generate pressure up the middle, get in a quarterback's head. So that's going to be something that'll be interesting to watch moving forward. But again, this is going to be an interesting matchup for this offense, and one, to your point, that they haven't faced yet this season. So it begs the question, Sean, what is at stake for this offense? We touched on this a little bit yesterday, but I think you have to start this conversation around not losing focus. Brian said something really key yesterday, and you have to learn how to handle success. That's big picture team, and that's also individual units. Notre Dame is on a historic pace for offense. I believe Brian talked about it yesterday and said that this offense has scored 105 offensive points in their last 2 games. Last time they did that was 1977 when Joe Montana was their quarterback. When you're doing something that hasn't been done in almost 50 years, over 50 years, that's really impressive. Yeah, what is it? 48 years, I think. When you're doing something that hasn't been done in that amount of time, this offense is on a historic pace. But they can't overlook an opponent like a Boise State and just assume that they're going to be able to roll the footballs out and have their way on offense. So, Sean, I think where we have to start with this conversation is this unit can't lose focus, and they have to continue to build.
I mean, that's what they've been doing. It's like, peeling back the layers off an onion. That's what they've been doing. We asked for the middle of the field to be taken advantage of in the pass game. And lo and behold, that's exactly what they do against Arkansas. And so now the challenge with the pressure packages and everything that Boise State is going to bring from a discipline standpoint, this might be the most disciplined team they face since the first 2 games, right? And so this is going to demand what Mike Denbrock has been asking for out of his offense, which is consistency. This is going to be a game that you grind. Right? Because I think Boise State is going to come in and say, we're not going to give up the big plays. Why is that important? In the last 2 games, 112 points, 56 each game, Notre Dame has come up with 36 explosive plays in the last 2 games. That's 19 via the pass, 17 via the run. That right there is what Boise State is staring in the face. So what do you think they're going to do? What's the main objective? Let's just stop the big plays. Let's keep everything in front of us. So how does that impact their pressure package? How does that impact when they decide to use it to break trend, to kind of give some new ideas and some new looks to this freshman quarterback, like you said, Arkansas and Purdue didn't take advantage of? It's going to be an interesting early game of chess, in my opinion, because Spencer Danielson and his staff, they're really good coaches. They have a really good coaching staff. So I'm very interested in seeing how they play chess. But as far as this Notre Dame offense, what's in it for them? Just building. Just building. Can they get back up? Maybe they don't get to 17 or 19, but maybe they get to collectively, but maybe they can get to that 15 range. And if they're still 12 to 15 explosive plays combined via the pass and run, then this Boise State defense is definitely in trouble. They're in trouble because, like I said, I think they're going to slow the game down, try to limit the possessions. But at some point, they have to score, and that's something we'll get to, right? Because you can't hold this offense down. I think this is really one of those offenses where you might have a game plan that works for a quarter. Maybe it works for a quarter and a half. But eventually, the dam is going to break. And when it breaks, there's no putting it back together. And Notre Dame can just rattle off 4 to 5 possessions where they put up 4 to 5 straight touchdowns. So It's just about consistency and continuing to build for this offense. Even if things don't go as smoothly as they did in the previous two games, you still want to build on. It starts with the offensive line. That for me, that's who's under the microscope this week because of who they're facing. I think you talked about the sacks. The last two defensive lines really weren't producing sacks. Purdue, most of their sacks came from the linebackers. Arkansas definitely didn't get a lot of sacks from that front four. And so now you're facing, you pointed out, the two guys in the front line, in the front four, they are primarily responsible for most of the sacks for Boise State and what they like to do. So that's going to be a new challenge. It's definitely going to be a new challenge and probably the best challenge for the offensive line and pass pro since that Texas A&M game. So now we get a litmus test for how they truly have progressed as an offensive line when it comes to protecting CJ Carr, because you're going to have to protect him from all of those pressure packages. That's what's on the line for me for this offensive line. Can they continue to do what they need to do? And like you guys have said, if you're putting up 56 points a game in the last two games, the offensive line is doing something right. Regardless of who they play, the offensive line has been playing much better than what we saw the first two games.
I agree completely. I mean, like we've said, it starts up front with the offensive line. That's a unit that we'll dive into here in a little bit. But I think one of the other things at stake, Sean, and we mentioned this a little bit last week. We mentioned it in the Purdue game, and now it's time to really start to get some of these other pieces involved. When I look at Notre Dame's offense, it's no longer going to become a secret of how they want to attack you. It isn't. And can you beat Boise State doing the same things that you did offensively? Yeah, I do, because sometimes it just comes down to, hey, we think our guys are better than your guys. Will that work against Stanford and Boston College and Navy? And probably. But if Notre Dame has aspirations to make any sort of postseason run, when they face NC State, when they face USC, when they face a Pitt, you're not going to just be able to only attack the perimeter. Excuse me. You're not going to only be able to attack the perimeter. You're going to have to find some ways to get your other pieces involved. Who are some of those other pieces that we've talked about? You know, you're going to have to find a way to get Jaden Greathouse and Will Pauling more involved. One of the two. Ideally, it's Jaden Greathouse because I like the skill set he brings to the table. But at the end of the day, you have to get another weapon involved in the pass game on the perimeter that's not just Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison. Because we're starting to see their wear and tear start to show up. Over 4 games, Jordan Faison's played over 200 snaps of offense. Malachi Fields has played 198. The next closest wide receiver is Jaden Greathouse at 112. You're going to have to find some way to add in some complementary pieces to this offense. When you go and you look at the tight end situation, I love talking about tight ends. Obviously, it's no secret. And I love what Eli Raridon has done so far this season. But when Notre Dame starts rolling out in 12 personnel, Brian brought this up yesterday, when you continuously roll out in 12 personnel, they're going to know that Ty Washington isn't a threat in the pass game. You need to look to get him involved. And then this one is more of a cherry on top, but one of your younger speedster type of receivers. We saw Micah Gilbert do some really good things in the opener. I would like to see him on the field a little bit more to give Malachi Fields that breather so he doesn't have to be on the boundary every single snap. I would love to see a KK Smith on the field to be able to stretch the field vertically. So you're going to need some of these pieces down the stretch, and ideally that comes not in, I guess, the end of the game. You're going to have to find different ways to get those pieces involved. I think that's something else that I want to see in that what's at stake. Because this is one of those matchups, Sean, where it's like, okay, if not this week against Boise State, where let's be real here, when you look at this matchup on paper, and we'll get to this in a second, but when you look at this matchup on paper, every position versus position battle favors Notre Dame. Now, there's different things that we have to see from each individual unit, but I don't look at this matchup on paper and say, their DBs might have it on these Notre Dame receivers, man. These linebackers might be able to stop Jay Love and Jadarian Price. That's not the case. So if not this game, when are we going to watch a Will Pauling, a Jaden Greathouse, a Micah Gilbert, a Ty Washington, a Jack Larson become a more integral part of this unit? I think that's a healthy question to have a conversation around. But I think those are some of the things that are at stake for this offense, man. What do you think? More complementary pieces involved? What do you think?
It's funny because I think there was a big picture plan for CJ Carr, right? And we kind of talked about that on the post-game show. And then they recognized, oh, snap, as much as we game plan to help CJ, the game plan every week should be to get the ball to 4 24. Like, we forgot to do that. As much as we were worried about our quarterback, we forgot to do the primary thing that we should do every week. And let's add now 0 to that because he's our bona fide number one. And so if we get those guys involved, along with bringing the quarterback along, everybody else can eat off of that. And I think we're going to start to see some of those pieces you just spoke about begin to eat a little bit more. You saw Jaden Greathouse eat a little bit more. Uh, Jordan Faison has been impactful, definitely when it comes to the rollout game, the speed out game, uh, the outs, the screen game early against Miami. They found ways to get him the ball. And then Michael Gilbert last week drew a couple of penalties. He really did impact the game with plays, but he did draw a couple of penalties in coverage. So I think they're trying to get him involved. And so I think we'll begin to see that more and more. And like I said, this is the best pass defense by yardage that they're going to face. Like, I know who they've played, but that's who they are right now. That's who they are. And so if this is as good as it get, they have a perfect landscape to paint that masterpiece of an evolving pass offense with the people and the opponents that they're going to face defensively moving forward. So I think they know that they have time and they have the landscape because who's on their schedule to be able to begin to add those pieces one game at a time, week by week. And I think it also is connected to the progression of the quarterback, right? It's his progression as well. You know, he has to get the confidence and the willingness to stay in the pocket when he has protection, to get to that third or fourth guy that might be coming open over the middle a little bit later. And those are the type of routes for guys like a Will Pauling, Jaden Greathouse, Elijah Burris, and all the other guys, KK and Micah Gilbert, and hopefully some of the other youngsters, as they get in and get some time and what looks to be future blowouts on this schedule as this season progresses. So I agree with you. Absolutely. And I do think we saw Ty Washington get targeted 3 times when Kenny Minchie came in against Purdue. I was almost like, okay, Kenny, it seems like you're used to throwing to him because you're targeting him in your progressions. So I think that he can be utilized, but it's a matter of, I always wonder, well, quarterbacks have their guys, and every quarterback is different, that they feel comfortable throwing to certain guys, right? And so I think, if you look, Ty Washington has been in the progression on certain plays. It's just a matter of, him actually making a play and CJ competing the pass and then building a rapport and a trust. And it starts in practice and eventually manifests itself in the game. But I think it's something that they know they can do, they can execute. But do they really need it right now? That's why I was so upset by, and I understood Marcus Freeman's explanation with the fake punt, right? And I understand, they build their fake punt package, the special teams package, it's customized for the opponent. But I'm like, the design say that. I understand why you did it, but I'm like, it's so good, save it. And then what we're talking about is some things that they probably have that they feel like we could save for some bigger moments as we get further into the schedule. I'm trying to think with Mike Denbrock, because it does seem like the fan base is like, give CJ more. And I think he is being very responsible as an offensive coordinator, knowing that the kid probably can handle more. I probably can give him more, but there's really no reason to rush it. Let's allow him to actually play and develop and let him tell us what's next instead of just saying, just let him loose. So I think eventually we're going to continue to see this passing game from the Fighting Irish evolve. Because, hey, man, look, at this point, let me give you something. As much as we complain about the offensive performance against Miami, who I think after 4 weeks, if they're not the best defensive line in college football, they're right behind Oklahoma. They're right there for 1-2. And this freshman faced in this Notre Dame offense faced that in their first game when they really didn't know who they were. They were still trying to find out who they were as an offense. Notre Dame scored 24 points. Combined, Trev, the other three opponents from Miami have scored 22. Let me say that again. Against that defense, the other opponents that have played Miami have tallied 22 points collectively. Notre Dame, when they didn't know who they were offensively, put up 24. So that just lets you know what they were, who they are now, and the ceiling they have as an offense is like there's a lot more room to grow. A lot more room to grow.
Oh, I agree. I mean, and 17 of those points came in one half, Sean. I'm really in a quarter and a half, if you think about it. I'm with you, and it's extremely impressive. But I agree. I hear where you're coming from with the fake punt stuff. There are certain plays that I think you just keep in your back pocket for a crucial moment. Now, and I'm sure you would agree with this, I'm sure that is not the only fake punt play that they have kind of in their back pocket also. I'd be willing to bet that they have a little bit more. But I think you have to have a little bit of a different conversation around personnel. What is the situation that you're waiting to unleash Jaden Greathouse and, Ty Washington or a Will Pauling or a KK Smith or a Micah Gilbert, I think that's one of the things where it's like, okay, you can't let Jaden Greathouse go cold every single week. But then if they make the college football playoff semifinals, then it's time to unleash number one on, you know what I mean? So I think that's, you got to start feeding them a little bit. One, that's going to build CJ's comfortability with him. I doubt we don't get to go to practices in season, so this is just pure speculation. But I highly doubt that Jaden Greathouse is the number one read and the number one target every single play in practice. And they're repping it and they're repping it and they're repping it. But then on Saturdays, they're like, hey, let's hold off in case, we're down against USC and we need a big play. Then Jaden Greathouse is going to be the guy. But moral of the story, I think the last thing at stake is you got to start getting these pieces involved. And that I know that we agree on. But, Sean, let's dive into the areas where Notre Dame matches up well. And we've talked about this before. And on paper, they match up well across the board. I mean what I said. There is not a unit on this team where I'm like, oh, gosh, Boise State might have the advantage here. Because I don't want to paint this false picture that Notre Dame is going to be athletically outmatched. I predicted them to go undefeated in the regular season. Why? Because I think that Notre Dame had the best roster compared to any team that they were going to face this year. And I still believe that to be true. Some teams, it's a little bit more even than others. But I think when you look top to bottom, I still think Notre Dame has a more talented roster than Miami. I still think Notre Dame has a more talented roster than Texas A&M. They didn't win. But I think as a whole, we can have a conversation of whose D-line is better, whose O-line is better. But big picture. Now, I feel the same way about Boise State. This is a good football team. This is an experienced football team. But when I talk about the areas where Notre Dame matches up well, I find myself in the same spot that I did against Purdue and against Arkansas, where it's like, on paper, they match up well, but that doesn't mean that they're not going to be tested. Like I said, this is a very experienced Boise State defense, Sean. They bring back 7 starters from last year's team that went 12-2, won the Mountain West, competed in the playoffs, went on the road in Autzen Stadium and competed against Oregon. So we talked about it yesterday. This isn't going to be a team. This isn't going to be a unit that gets overwhelmed by the moment of, oh my gosh, we're playing in Notre Dame Stadium. Touchdown Jesus is behind us. We're playing against Notre Dame. This is a team that isn't going to come to South Bend and flinch. And you talked about it before, but when you have guys like Braxton Feely and Jaden Vergen-Morgan and Marco Notarini and Ty Benefield and, Amarian McCoy, like these are all players that have seen and been around those moments. But, Sean, I'd like to get your thoughts on this. When you talk about where Notre Dame matches up well, do you kind of have the same sentiment that I do, or are things a little bit more in question in your eyes?
No, I really don't think from a talent standpoint and just from the standpoint of having one unit that you feel like can really make an impact outside of the 2 guys on the defensive line and the pressure they can apply. I think, once again, this game goes back to the offensive line for me. This is going to be a good test. Can this offensive line kind of dictate terms in the run game and then protect the quarterback on third down? Because Notre Dame has definitely been effective on third downs. And so can they continue to do that? Because that's how you extend drives, and that's how you allow your offense to go and put up 7 instead of 3. So that's going to be vitally important. As I said before, I do think a formidable coaching staff is coming in. I expect the game plan for Boise State to be a whole lot better than Purdue. Look, Purdue came in and tried to force Notre Dame. They tried to stop Notre Dame, shall I say, with 3-man fronts. Like, I have no clue what Barry Odom and his staff were thinking. I just don't think Spencer Danielson and his staff are going to come in and just roll over to the Notre Dame run game. I just don't. And I think Arkansas basically they gave Notre Dame everything. They allowed them to do whatever they wanted. Like, hey, you can run it on 3rd and 8, or you can pass it on 3rd and 8. Do whatever you want to do, you can do it. You want to throw the throwback screen, throw it. You want to go ahead and throw over the middle, go right ahead. We're not even going to cover you. We're going to be in zone and leave Will Pauling just nowhere. No one's within 10 yards of him. Just go ahead, pitch and catch. I don't think you're going to get that against Boise State. I think their attention to detail is going to be a little bit better than the previous 2 defenses that Notre Dame has faced. And Notre Dame is going to have to go ahead and make some plays, and the offensive line is going to go ahead and be the linchpin and dictate, to this defense, and then get them off balance, right? Take them out of the situations, because if you don't get the 3rd down, you kind of take them out of their pressure. That if you can just continue to get chunk plays and continue to move the chains, and don't get the 3rd down as much as they want to take you to 3rd down, now you kind of take their best thing away, which is their pressure package. So I think it's going to be very important that Notre Dame kind of takes more shots. And that's one of the things last week, as effective as they were offensively, they should have had 70 points, to be honest, because one of the best parts of CJ's game has been his accuracy down the field. And he was inaccurate multiple times down the field when they had opportunities to make big plays. So if they can clean that up and CJ gets back to, taking advantage of defenses down the field, and he hurts the Broncos down the field, yeah, it could be a very long day. This is definitely a game with Notre Dame, and the way they execute will dictate what type of game it is. It's not about the opponent. Like, whoever Notre Dame is on Saturday is going to dictate how this game goes.
Oh, I agree. It comes down to the matchup of a faceless opponent, and I agree with you entirely. But there are some interesting matchups, Sean, when you do go and look at this, and we've talked about it a lot already. Just to highlight it one more time, this is a different defensive line than this offensive line has faced. Every defensive line it feels like Notre Dame has gone up against this season has been massive. Massive. I mean, you got Ruben Bain, you have Tyler Onyedem, you have guys like DJ Hicks, and then last week you have Cameron Ball and Ian Gefford and Quincy Rhodes. This week it's a little bit different, and Notre Dame is going to be tested to see if they can stop more of the slashing, quicker pass rushers than just the big physical bodies. And I think that's what's going to be interesting. One of their biggest defensive linemen is under 300 pounds, Braxton Feely. Braxton Feely, I think, is like 6'1", 6'2", 296. Jaden Vergen-Morgan, he's a decent-sized guy, but he's not, Ruben Bain. He's not Akeem Mesidor. And so this is going to be a very interesting matchup for this unit to see, okay, is Joe Rudolph's unit prepared to be a well-rounded offensive line? Doesn't matter if you throw a big-bodied in there or if you throw a quicker, twitchier edge rusher in there. I think that's going to be interesting to watch. And then the other matchup that I'm curious to see, Sean, are they going to be able to take advantage of isolation matchups similar to what they did last week in the pass game? Ty Benefield is a very experienced safety. He is not good in coverage. Just isn't. He has experience, but he's a box safety. Flies downhill. He leads the team in tackles for loss as a safety. His game is not playing coverage. It isn't. So far this season, he's given up 8 receptions on 10 targets, 91 yards receiving, and 1 touchdown. Last year, he gave up 33 receptions on 47 targets, 471 receiving yards, and 6 touchdowns. He is somebody that Mike Denbrock, who did a really good job last week of getting Eli Raridan matched up on a safety, Jeremiah Love matched up on a linebacker and a safety, getting Jadarian Price out in space. They're going to have to do that again because this is a team that you can take advantage of those one-on-one matchups. And I'm willing to bet that we're probably going to talk about it tomorrow on Keys to Victory. But you have to be able to find different ways to do that. Marco Notarini, they're one of their best linebackers. Started for them all last season. He hasn't really been attacked in the pass game that much. 6 targets all year, but he's given up 4 receptions for, I believe, around 20 yards. That's a matchup that Notre Dame is going to have to be able to take advantage of. Because to your point, Sean, this is a more well-coached unit, and they're not just going to let C.J. Carr throw jump balls and comebacks to Malachi Fields and Jordan Faison all Saturday. So you're going to have to find different ways to attack this team. I think the next evolution for this offense is starting to chip away at attacking the middle of the field. I'm not saying all game you start throwing deep overs and post routes and slants across the middle. You don't have to do that either. Do what wins you the game. But if you're able to take advantage of those matchups, I think that's something that'll be advantageous for Mike Denbrock to do. Sean, let's wrap up this segment and talk about some players that need to shine in this matchup. And again, we're talking about it in a different light of, we could talk about C.J. Carr. C.J. Carr does not have to go 22 of 30 for 354 passing yards and 4 touchdowns for Notre Dame to walk away with a victory. But we've talked about faceless opponent, what really Notre Dame needs to do and the steps that they have to continue to take. So when you start talking about the players that need to shine to you in this matchup, Sean, where do you start?
Malachi Fields. Their defensive backfield is 6 foot, 5'11", 5'11", 6 foot. So, man, jump balls, back shoulder throws, deep routes. Give Malachi Fields a bunch of targets down the field and allow him to establish some things and back this Broncos offense off of what they want to do. And now you can get them off balance and dictate whatever you want to do offensively to them. So Malachi Fields, for me, has to be a major player in this game. Of course, it's easy to say it's low-hanging fruit to say 4-24. Jeremiah Love and Jadarian Price, keep doing what you're doing. But another thing that I would love to see is one of these tight ends, especially if you're going to be giving pressure packages, tight end delays, even crossers, or just quick things out to the flat to be able to allow your tight ends to get into space. If they can run over a guy, make one man miss, you can turn a 3-yard gain possibly into a 10-yard gain, things like that. So, the quick game, I think, is going to return. We really haven't seen it the same way we saw it against Miami, but I'm very interested in how the quick game comes back to combat, some of those pressure packages from Boise State.
So you taking Malachi Fields over in receiving yards, Sean? I know you're not a bettor, but
I would say, hey man, look, I was over on FanDuel, man, and I saw the receiving yards. Jordan Faison's at 56 and Malachi's at 53 and a half. That 53 and a half might be okay. This might be a game where he gets that on one throw. He might get that on one throw, and then you walk away. That's what it is right now over at FanDuel, 53 and a half. So yeah, I'm thinking that might be a pretty good play. Might be, but this might be the game that Eli Raridan also ends up with 4 or 5 receptions in this game. Because like you said, they really don't have the athletes, particularly behind their defensive line, to really defend anything that Notre Dame has at the skill positions. So, and then of course, Mike Denbrock is going to continue to take advantage of other opposition linebackers with Jeremiah Love in the passing game. Like, dude, he has so many toys to play with. It's almost like, man, should I be Scorpion? Should I be Sun Tzu? All the Mortal Kombat. It's almost like it's
Sub-Zero, Raiden.
Yes,
come on now.
That's the Notre Dame offense. They can choose whomever they want to be out of Mortal Kombat. They could be Scorpion, Sub-Zero, Raiden. I was really a Raiden guy. I was.
I was a Sub-Zero guy. I put in work with Sub-Zero.
I love finishing people when they're frozen. Yeah, that was dope. That was dope. And then the Scorpion.
That needs to be the nickname for Jay Love and JD Price, Scorpion and Sub-Zero. I'm putting that out there right now. That would be a great nickname.
I think the last 2 games, Notre Dame's offense was Scorpion. They basically were telling Purdue and Arkansas, get over here. And just smacking them up. That's basically what they told their last two opponents. It's just hook them,
Oh,
get over here,
oh, that's so
and get
good.
out of there. So this
Oh,
week
that's
it should be
awesome.
pretty interesting to see, where Persona, the Notre Dame offense, takes on.
Agreed. Agreed completely. I have a couple here, Sean, wrapping this up. The first one for me is CJ Carr. He put on an exceptional performance against Arkansas. Accuracy, things need to be cleaned up, but like we've talked about before, we've seen him make those throws. I'm not concerned that, oh no, this is the fourth game in a row, CJ can't hit the deep ball. I'm not concerned about that. But what I do want to see is him continually take steps in the next direction. This is a new task for him outside of just between the white lines. Okay, we've seen you perform in the big moments against Miami and Texas A&M. We saw how you've performed back against the wall against Purdue and Arkansas. Now it's very small, but now this team gets a little bit of breathing room, and there's an opponent coming to South Bend who on paper is an inferior matchup to what your offense has been. How do you command this offense? Do you go about it like we've been talking about? This is a faceless opponent. We need to execute. Notre Dame's offense has to get things done. We have to be clean procedurally. We have to be clean execution-wise. Or does this unit struggle handling success? We just put up 56 points. We put up 641 total yards of offense against an SEC defense, albeit a bad SEC defense, but you did it on the road. Boise State's coming to town. I just watched what Air Force's offense did to them. Yeah, we'll be cool. And then before you know it, they jump on you and you have back-to-back 3-and-outs. What version of this offense are we going to see? Now, I think a big part of that is how CJ performs on Saturday. The next one for me is the right side of the offensive line. I want to see them take a next step. Gerby Lambert has been getting better every single week. Every single week. And, man, when you go back and pop in the film, he was absolutely moving people on that Arkansas defensive line. Absolutely moving people. So this is going to be a test for him.
And they weren't small.
No.
They weren't small.
Hey, man, like we were talking about last week, very rarely are you somebody like Gerby Lambert, who's 6'7", 335 pounds, and you're going up against somebody that outweighs you by 32 pounds. I'm pretty sure that doesn't happen a whole lot for that young man. So we got to see what he was in that matchup, big versus big. How are you going to be when you go up against somebody that's 6'2", 290 pounds? What's that going to look like? And so it's different. I'm talking about the right side of the offensive line, but I'm looking for different things. For Gerby Lambert, it's continuing to progress. For Emil Wagner, it's getting back to who you were last season. I thought he played relatively well against Arkansas. Not great, not bad. He was just kind of there after going back and diving into the film. Can you return to that level that you were at midseason form of 2024? Can you accelerate the way that you do things? His feet were pretty slow, honestly. Like, it felt like he was just a step slower in the pass game and run game. And this is a very quick Boise State defensive line. Are you going to be able to return to who you were last season? And then the last one, not going to harp on it too long, but it's those complementary pieces, Sean, like we talked about before. Can Greathouse or Pauling get involved? Can Ty Washington get involved in the pass game? Are we going to see another receiver? Not 7 minutes left in the game in the fourth quarter, we see Kenny Minchie throw an out route to KK Smith. I'm talking you have legit burner speed marinating on the sideline. Is this a game where we see it? Not saying that Malachi Fields or Will Pauling or Faison or Greathouse also can't take the top off of a defense. But guys like KK Smith and Cam Williams do have a different level of speed than those guys. Doesn't make the other guys slow. It just means that those guys can move. Is this going to be a game where we see something like that? Maybe. I'm not betting the house on it / rent on it. But at the end of the day, that is something that I would like to see. But bigger picture, complementary pieces, second tight end, and one of Will Pauling or Jaden Greathouse getting more involved in this pass game. Those are some of the players that I would like to see shine, truthfully. But folks, that's going to do it for part one of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. Don't go anywhere. We're getting ready to talk some defense. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, in part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast, brought to you by FanDuel, we're talking Notre Dame's defense versus the Boise State offense. And similar conversation to what we had when we talked Notre Dame's offense versus the Boise State defense. This is strength versus struggle. But the strength of Boise State's team has been their offense. The struggling aspect for Notre Dame's team so far this season has been their defense. Now, they had a good step forward against Arkansas. But like we talked about in yesterday's show, that's the anomaly. When you're bad against Miami, abysmal against Texas A&M, you're against Purdue, and then you're pretty good against Arkansas, what defense is it? What kind of defense are you? And this isn't an offense that's going to wait for you to sit around and figure out what type of defense you are, Sean. I mean, when you go and you look at the numbers, Boise State on offense, this has been the clear strength of their team. They average 38.5 points a game. They average 7.1 yards per play, 520 total yards of offense, 299 passing yards, 221 rushing yards, both ranked 20th in the country. It's a very balanced team. They're a balanced team that does a really good job of taking care of the football and limiting negative plays. They've only given up 3 sacks on the year. They've only thrown 1 interception on the year. They've only allowed 20 tackles for a loss this season, which ranks inside of the top 40 in the country. They average 5.8 yards per rush. This is a very efficient offense that doesn't shoot themselves in the foot. Then you flip over to the Notre Dame defense, Sean. They're 99th in the country in points per game, 96th in the country in yards per game, 95th in the country in yards per rush, 121st in the country in passing yards per game allowed. They're 134th in the country in tackles for loss generated, 96th in the country in sacks generated. This is going to be, to your point, a very good litmus test for where this defense truly is. Can you take that next step in your progression? Because I liked, in some aspects, what they did against Arkansas, but right now that's the outlier. Can you continue to build? But Sean, when you look at these numbers, it's pretty evident who, on paper, has the advantage going into this matchup.
It's interesting because I go back to the conversation I had about the Notre Dame offense and comparing them to what they did against Miami on one of the best defensive lines. You said, they were bad against Miami defensively. And the only other team to hold Miami to decent numbers was a kind of okay Florida defense, kind of like in the 40s, which is better than Notre Dame. But both defenses did the same thing against Miami's offense. So I think for me, this game is going to be about making sure you continue to build on the positive things. I went back and I looked at when Notre Dame, they gave up the touchdown, which was just a bad drive, man. Just so many mistakes. And Arkansas closes it to 14-10. Notre Dame comes right back. They score to go up 21-10. And then the very next drive, they get off the field with, a great play by Mark Zachary in coverage, leading to a high throw. If the throw is on target, it's a possible pick six. Then you get to third down, and you have a great play. They run a good game up front. Cole Mullins gets out to the edge, forces Taylor Green further to the outside, and Drake Bowen just chases him down to get off the field. Like, for me, it wasn't so much scheme and other things being solved that still illed the defense. What I saw a lot of against Arkansas was players just made plays. When they needed a play, players made plays. Even the next drive, they come out, they're up 28-10, and then the next thing you know, they give up. Botello gives up leverage to Taylor Green on the RPO. He has the big run down the right sideline. They get down to the 22-yard line, and then Notre Dame snuffs it out. They okay, we gave up the play. We got to hold them to a field goal. They hold them to a field goal. And one of those plays, you see these guys, great play call by Trino. Great design, great play call on the screen, and both your defensive tackles just snuff it out. They smell it, they stop their pass rush, and there you had Gabriel Rubio and Jason Onye killing the play, right? And then they go to a nice package with a 3-man rush, and they end up getting, some pressure on that play. So I'm just telling you, man, we can sit up here, we can talk about Chris Ash, we can talk about calls, we can talk about this defense having to get acclimated to what they're being asked to do and doing it better. But at the end of the day, regardless of the call, your players can go out there and still make plays. Whatever the call is, your players can go make plays, right? Because it wasn't the play call that stopped that screen pass. It was the identification by your interior guys that recognized the screen and caused it to not be executed. So that's what needs to happen, right? So now let's take it to the next level. When we talk about the second level and the linebackers being better in the run game, coming into gaps, coming downhill, especially against Boise State, because that's really the strength. They have a three-headed monster at running back. They really do. They have three. They don't have one guy, one dynamic guy like Ashton Genty, and that's really why their offense is taking off because of their run game. I think, if I'm not mistaken, that offensive line has the 9th best run block rate in the nation, which is crazy because it's an improvement over what they did last year as an offensive line when they had a dynamic running back. Can you imagine Ashton Genty running behind this offensive line the way they've been playing? And of course, they've only played certain teams in certain competition, but the numbers are the numbers. So I'm going to speak about them as they sit today. So for me, I think that's something that provides a challenge because you saw Arkansas early in the game be successful with the run, even though Notre Dame up to that point had done a pretty good job as a rush defense. That was something they could point to and say, yo, we've done a pretty decent job as a rush defense. I think this Broncos offensive line is going to be a good challenge, a very good challenge. They don't have to worry about Matson definitely attacking them with his legs. And to be honest, I'm very interested to see what Chris Ash does because Matson's not going to really attack you down the field. And they really don't have the speed of receiver to stretch Notre Dame like that or scare Notre Dame like that. So you would think that this is an opportunity to suffocate this Broncos offense and really stifle their run game. And once you stifle their run game, I think I heard that Matson in play action has like a 81 rating as a quarterback. And in just straight drop back, he's like 62 in rating. So that lets you, he's better when the run game is going. It's his game is off of play action. And so you want to be able to take that run game away. So it's going to be on these linebackers. This should be the linebackers. I know we're going to get to the guys that need to step up. I'm just kind of teasing right now where I'm going when we get to that. It's time. This is a game tailor-made for this linebacking core in the front four to go out and dominate.
To put some numbers behind what you're talking about, Sean, I just looked it up. In play action, Maddox Madsen has gone 21 of 33. Its completion percentage is 63.6. On straight dropbacks, he's 58 of 99 for 58.6% completion. I'm not going to dive into screen passes. He's 12 of 13. So it's one of those where you're right. When the run game is working, Maddox Madsen is an efficient quarterback. But Sean, that is a perfect segue into what some of the biggest things at stake for this Notre Dame defense. I think you hit the nail on the head. This is the game we need to see this defense be more aggressive. Respectfully, Boise State is not an offense that's going to really attack you that much down the field. They're not. I mean, look, when you go and you start talking about some of the stats, Sean, and I'll pull them back up here real quick. You go and you look at what Boise State has done. They've had 7 completions of 30 yards or longer. A lot of those, and I went back and watched, have been catch and runs. It hasn't looked like what C.J. Carr did to Arkansas's defense, where he's just finding guys 20 yards down the field. It's not the case. It isn't. And so, however, but if Chris Ash sticks with the mentality of, hey, let's play this soft shell coverage, let's not get hands on any of the players running underneath, that's where he begins to thrive. And that is something that you can't have happen. I mean, look, he's only in 4 games, he's attempted 16 shots down the field of 20 yards or longer, and he's 6 of 16. To put some numbers behind that. In passes of 10 to 19 yards down the field, he's 19 to 37. Maddox Madsen makes his living on throws 0 to 9 yards past the line of scrimmage, 1 to 9 yards past the line of scrimmage. He's 36 of 51. He completes 70% of his passes. To put that into perspective, and Maddox Madsen has gone 6 of 16 on throws 20 yards or longer down the field. So far this season, CJ Carr, in the same amount of games, has attempted 22 throws of 20 yards or longer down the field. He's completed 12 of them. 10 of 19 yards of depth down the field. He's completed 14 of 20, which is actually insane when you think about it. But to your point, Sean, this isn't an offense. This isn't a quarterback that's going to push it down the field because their perimeter skill, like Latrell Caples is a decent receiver. I look at Chris Marshall. He's another player that they're really trying to get going. They haven't really tried to use Matt Lauder that much down the field. He's second on the team in receptions, but I think he's fourth or fifth in yardage. He has 13 catches for 148 yards, 1 touchdown on the season. And so this is a game where Notre Dame needs to be aggressive. They need to get hands on these receivers. They need to trigger their linebackers. They need to bring a little bit more pressure because Maddox Madsen isn't the tallest quarterback in stature in the world. He's 5'10". He's like 200 and something pounds. This is a game where you absolutely need to make him uncomfortable because if you just sit back and let him dink and dunk all over the field, like we saw this defense do against Miami, against Texas A&M, at times against Purdue, he's somebody that can put up some decent numbers. I think that's where you start when you start talking about what's at stake. The other things at stake for this defense is like what I talked about before. Is Arkansas the anomaly or is it the new normal? Can you continue to build on that success? And I think that's going to be so important for this team and this unit moving forward. It's going to be massive for Chris Ash to be able to build on that performance, not hang your hat on, okay, we held an offense that averages 43.5 points per game to 13. We've made it. We've arrived. Because like you and I talked about in the postgame show with Brian, some of Arkansas's drives that stalled out were more so Arkansas not executing, not so much Notre Dame's defense causing the stop. Now, later in the game, the screen pass to your point, that was all Jason Onye. Boubacar came away with the sack, but Jason Onye played that perfectly. And I thought it was fantastic. There were other, but Mark Zachary's breakup in the end zone. Tate Johnson played like a man possessed. Adon Schuler looked like he returned to true form. Back to who he was at his best last season. But you got to build on it because the linebackers, and I'm going to talk about them a little bit later, but the linebackers got to find a way to get going in this game. Sean, when you start talking about the areas where Notre Dame matches up well against the Boise State offense, where do you begin? Because I am under the assumption that it's a similar conversation that we had with the offense. On paper, Notre Dame's defense matches up well with every position group on this Boise State offense. Now, that doesn't mean there's areas that they can't hurt you. But again, on paper, there's no receiver that I look at on Boise State's roster that says they could give this cornerback some problems. What do you think? How do they match up against this Boise State offense?
I think look, once again, I think this has kind of been a blessing in disguise the way this schedule is played out because Notre Dame has grown. I think this is the perfect break in the midst of teams that can only score. I think they're facing teams that have to outscore them to have a chance to beat them. When we're speaking about USC, North Carolina State, and Arkansas. Boise State, of course, in order to win a game, you have to outscore the other team. But Boise State doesn't want to come in and make this a track meet. That's not what this. So they're going to make this, we want to play in the mud. It's going to be 80 degrees, so it's going to be beautiful conditions. But they want to make this very much a slugfest. Hope they get some turnovers, limit the possessions for Notre Dame's offense, taking it to the fourth quarter. They want to do what Northern Illinois did. That's what they want to do. They want to play that type of game. They want to be able to run the ball, hit a couple of big play action throws, and take it to the fourth quarter, and hopefully they can have one drive to win it all and come away with the victory. And they're going to play to their strengths, which is the quarterback and play action in the run game. That's their strength. So for me, I think this plays to the Notre Dame pass defense won't be stressed the way they have been, but they will be stressed when it comes to eye discipline, especially at the linebacker level and especially at the safeties, right? Because we don't know if Leonard Moore is going to play, but let's just assume he doesn't, and it's Christian Gray and Mark Zachary again. What we've seen in Mark Zachary and his growth, what has been able to beat him has been speed down the field, and Boise State doesn't have that. So now, how aggressive, how does that help the defensive backs play? But once again, it goes to the play calls. It goes to the ability of this defensive line, once again, being able to pressure the quarterback, make plays, make him uncomfortable. And I think it just all starts, I said on the offensive side of the ball, it starts with the offensive line. And as much as I'm going to talk about certain players that might be in other position groups, it starts with this defensive line, setting the tone, stopping the run, getting penetration, getting tackles for loss, not allowing Boise State to operate from their menu list, right? Which is, staying ahead of the chains. Like they have some plays on their, menu list of plays that they want to get to in certain situations, and you want to keep them in unfavorable situations. That's what you really want to do. So for me, I don't really think they pose a challenge that can hurt Notre Dame, but I do think they pose a challenge that's going to test just how much better this Notre Dame defense has gotten over the last two games. This is a different test that they haven't had. And I think it's going to be a difference in physicality, because their offensive line, they're all over 300 pounds, good size. So, and also the way they execute the run game is going to be a test of consistency, because they've broken off. All three of their running backs have runs over 40 yards. So they've been living off big plays in the run game. I mean, they did that last year. That's what that offense really breathes off of, big plays in the run game. So that, and then play action and run after the catch. So tackling is going to be at a premium as well. So it's going to be a challenge to doing the consistent things. It might not be as sexy as, going out against a wide open offense, an explosive offense like Arkansas. But now you get to buckle down and just really play old school, a little bit of old school football, trenches, stop the run, and then do your thing on third down and shut down the passing game. Kind of grind it out defensively.
No, I agree with you completely. This needs to be a day where the defensive line gets unleashed. I'm expecting big performances from some people on the defensive line. And Boise State has a quality offensive line. Cage Casey, I think, is one of the better offensive tackles in the country. 6'5", 315. He's only allowed one sack in the last two seasons and only one hit on the quarterback in the last two seasons. It's a good left tackle. But I think that Notre Dame is going to be able to take advantage. People talk all the time about, Notre Dame's D-line is undersized. Notre Dame's D-line is undersized. Well, this is one where I think the size matchup is relatively even across the board, in my eyes, especially along the interior. One of their interior offensive linemen, their left guard Tyler Knaith, is 6'2", 318 pounds. Gabe Rubio is 6'5", 322 pounds. Jason Onye is 6'5", 300 pounds. Jared Dawson is 6'1", 290-ish pounds. Elijah Hughes is 6'3", 300 pounds. This should be a game where the Notre Dame interior defensive lineman is able to get more of a push. I don't think they were able to get too much of a push in the run game against Arkansas. And they're going up against guys like, Fernando Carmona, who's a really good offensive guard. He was their left tackle last year, kicked him inside the guard. I think that was a brilliant move. But they're not going up against Enenez Cooper and Armaj Reed-Adams. And then I look at the edge players, and I think that there's going to be some guys on the edge that we'll talk about later that I also think need to have some big games. But look, man, I also start along the defensive line. And we broke down in the Upon Further Review, which is currently on the message boards at irishbreakdown.com, of why Notre Dame's defensive line hasn't been able to get home. And it's typically when their coverage isn't married up with what they're doing on the front, meaning they're not getting hands and rerouting receivers in zone. They're playing too soft to man coverage. I mean, there were a couple plays, Sean, that we broke down where Taylon Green gets to the top of a very quick three-step drop. And Jared Dawson, Bryce Young, and Boubacar were a step away from hitting the quarterback. but it's really hard to get hands on a quarterback when he gets the ball out in less than a second and a half. So coverage is going to have to be married up a little bit better in this game. That's one of the reasons why I think it needs to be more aggressive on Saturday, because I don't think this Boise State team can hurt you down the field like an Arkansas could. So I think that's one of the things that I'm going to be keeping my eye on. That's absolutely for sure. Overall, I think that this secondary also needs to have an afternoon where they get back to playing some lockdown coverage. We started to see hints of it against Arkansas. I thought Christian Gray played a little bit more instinctive against the pass, especially in zone. He had a fantastic play against cover 3, where Christian Gray read the underneath route, and I thought that was fantastic. So this is one thing that I think that the secondary has to be able to do. So ideally, that's one unit that we see really take off for Notre Dame this weekend. But I'm with you, Sean. This definitely starts along the defensive line. Sean, when you look at the players that have to shine in this matchup, where do you start?
I teased it. So I'm going to start with linebackers, man. They all have to come in. They have to be aggressive, man. You can't allow, first of all, in conjunction with the defensive line, you have to be able to set the edge with your run defenders. And you can't be sitting there trying to cover. They have to trust each other. That's something I saw. I don't know if I want to characterize it as a lack of trust, but literally I would see, the linemen get into their gaps, and there will be an open gap for a linebacker. Either one of the linebackers will overcommit and leave the backside gap open when they should have just stayed there and just filled that gap, and all the gaps would have been closed, and you probably keep the run to about a 2 or 3 yard gain. So it's just eye discipline, not trusting, everybody else on the defense, and just keeping your responsibility and filling the gap. And I think I want to see the front end of the defensive line work a little bit better with the linebackers. But the linebackers, Drake Bowen has to have a game. This is tailor-made for Drake Bowen. He doesn't have to worry about a Taylor Green and other responsibilities. Look, they're running the ball. That's what they want to do. They have to run the ball to be effective as an offense. 34, this is your game. This is what you live for. Come downhill. We've seen you hit and make impactful hits all season long. It's time for you to go ahead and make that in bunches this week against Boise and make it known. And that goes for everybody. Kingston, same thing. Jay Nosberry, same thing. Matt Faramo and Sneed, Jalen Sneed. Everybody that plays, you have to be aggressive. You have to go downhill, and you have to make plays. You have to make plays. So for me, I'm going to say the linebacker group. I do think opposite of Boubacar, because I'm going to be honest, I love what I see developing with Elijah Hughes and this little NASCAR third down package where they put Kingston at one end, Boubacar on the other end, Cole Mullen on the inside, and then Junior on the inside, or a combination of Elijah Hughes with Cole Mullen on the inside. It's like, okay, they have 4 pass rushers on the field, and you saw them be successful in that situation, make some plays. You saw some other 3-man alignments where Kingston would come in, playing with a game, and they got pressure that way. So I like what I'm seeing with the development of the games and the pass rush, and hopefully can get better. But that guy opposite Boubacar Traore, when it comes to just being able to create pass rush one-on-one in this game, I would definitely love to see it. I would love to see it, whether it's Junior, Bryce, whomever it is. I would like to see some pressures. And I think Jordan Patel, let me tell you something, man. I have so much respect for Jordan Patello. That kid, he literally is giving Notre Dame everything he has. Everything. And the fact that he is resilient and he continues to go out there, made the mistake last week on the big run, but other than that, when you really watch the film, he's doing some good things. He's doing some good things. So I'll start with the linebackers, and then I'll go to defensive end opposite.
For the linebackers in the run game, Sean, I just hope that they get released to play downhill. This isn't a question, and I've seen people ask this in the chat. This isn't a question of skill. Yes, Sean and I are not naive to the fact that on paper, that's what we've been talking about this entire time. On paper, Notre Dame holds the advantage across the board. It's, are they going to be put in a position to be successful? Drake Bowen is not a linebacker that should be dropping to 15 to 17 yards of depth and trying to get underneath post routes in the seam. It's not the strength of his game. Kingston Viliamasa should not be used as a spy. Now, I doubt that they're going to use a spy in this game against Maddox Madsen, but point remains, this linebacking unit has to be put in better positions to succeed, because when they are, that's when the talent takes over. That's when, Boise State running backs, as talented as they are, Dylan Riley and Sire Gaines and Malik Sherrod, like you said, by committee, they're not having 40-yard runs against this Notre Dame defense if they're allowed to play the way that they should be allowed to play. If Drake, if Kingston, if Jalen Sneed, if Madden Framo, if Jaden Osbury are released to go downhill, fly downhill, and attack the football. I think we can all agree upon that. I mean, here's the weird thing, Sean. You can't even, on FanDuel, you can't even bet on the Boise State running backs for rush yards right now. I don't have a single rush prop, not a one. I think you can bet on them for an anytime touchdown. I think. Let me look. Yeah, the closest running back is Dylan Riley and then Sire Gaines. They're both at plus 190 to score an anytime touchdown. Malik Sherrod's at plus 220. But point remains, you can't even bet on them right now, which is actually interesting. But where I'm going to be interested to watch the linebacker, Sean, is actually in pass coverage. Because I think that Boise State has a tight end that they might try to get going in this game. So we watched that at times last year. Against Washington State last year, he had 96 receiving yards and 2 touchdowns. Against Penn State in the Fiesta Bowl last year, he had 96 receiving yards and a touchdown. He's kind of been Madsen's go-to guy in bigger games. It was weird. I'm looking it up right now to see how many times he was targeted against USF. Yeah, against USF, he had 4 receptions for 35 yards. Really, outside of that, he hasn't done too much, and I thought he was going to be one of that offense's go-to guys. But look, the linebackers in coverage this year haven't been spectacular, and there's a lot of different reasons as to why. No, it has nothing to do with skill. Again, this is the same conversation around, can they be put in positions to be successful? But what the numbers tell us, so far the linebackers as a unit have given up 18 receptions on 24 targets for 192 yards and a touchdown. So this can't be the game where 6'3", 240-pound Matt Lauder has his kind of breakout game on a national stage inside of Notre Dame Stadium. How many times have we seen that, Sean, as Notre Dame fans? There's one player that just kind of comes on and puts on a show. Last year against Northern Illinois, it was Ontario Brown. So I think that's one thing that's going to be interesting to watch, how Boise State try to utilize their tight end. But this is a game where I think that the linebackers need to be a little bit more disciplined in coverage. Because there were a couple things. You go back and you pop in the film from what Jaden Osbury was asked to do. He was supposed to sit underneath. He was a hook to curl read. And there was one point where on a deep in cut it was either Raylan Sharp or Omega Blake. There was one in cut that he tried to get underneath, but he just turned around, turned his back to the quarterback in zone and ran to the sideline. I'm not entirely sure what that was. Like, I know he was turning to try to get underneath the curl route, but he ran outside of the numbers well after the outside receiver made his in cut. So it's stuff like that where they're going to have to be a little bit better. And I hope to see that against Boise State. I hope they play a little bit more aggressive. I hope to see them get hands on underneath routes, try to reroute, drag routes, hook curls, things like that. We watched Madden Framo do it against Purdue, and it led to a tip ball interception. So I hope to see a little bit more of that. And then the last thing, Sean, you already touched on it, but I hope the defensive line continues to perform well. I think that this has been a unit that I think they get a little bit too much flack because a lot of people talk, how do you not get a pass rush? How do you not get a pass rush? Well, we broke down against Arkansas, and it's consistent with what we saw against A&M and Purdue and Miami. When the coverage plays as soft as it does, you're not giving your defensive front time enough to get home. But with that being said, you do still need people to step up. I think you said it perfectly. Somebody outside of Boubacar Traore has to step up. Sean, I want to ask you something real quick. I want to get your thoughts because I mentioned this upon further review. I think Notre Dame's best defensive linemen this year have been Boubacar Traore, Jared Dawson, and Gabe Rubio. And I don't know, like there's been other players that have flashed, but I think consistently those have been Notre Dame's best 3 defensive linemen. What do you think?
I'm trying to really think if I could squeeze someone in there. Yeah, yeah, that's pretty much it. That's pretty much it. I think what we've seen Gabriel Rubio do, and once again, resiliency. But this is a young man that personal reasons or whatever else, at one point in time, we didn't know if he was going to be part of the program. You know, he had a Damascus or pitchfork in the road moment. And what he's decided to do and what he has become as a football player, which is much more complete. He's not just that run stopper guy. He's a guy that's actually applying pressure and making some quick moves, getting into gaps in between offensive linemen and getting up the field, something we didn't see consistently. And he's giving you that pretty much every game. We talked about the awareness of him and Jason Onye on that screen pass. So, yeah, I would agree that those 3 guys. But I'm telling you, man, the more snaps 42 gets, he's like, let me join the party. Like, I don't want to be outside. Let me in. And so, those are the things that give you a feeling that things are going to get better. Outside of scheme, outside of coaching, you just start to feel like Matt Faramo making a play. Like, okay, Cole Mullen making a play. Now you're starting to see other guys come up that you start to feel a sense from a depth standpoint that you felt last year when you lost your frontline guys and you would have a Junior or a Josh Burnham or Gabriel Rubio, Donovan Hines step up as backups. Now you start to see these younger guys kind of solidify, and give you the same feeling that you have. So I think, yeah, long answer, but yes, I agree. I agree.
No, I hear you, man. Look, and there's some other players that I think will start to make more of an impact when they get healthier. And Donovan Hines only played 10 snaps against Arkansas. He had, I think, the first sack of the game against Purdue. Josh Burnham hasn't been healthy this season. I know he's had some health issues, and so we haven't gotten to see him at full strength. But, those 3 kind of stick out. But regardless, somebody else opposite of Boubacar Traore, specifically on the edge, is going to have to step up this game. And moving forward, they have to lay the groundwork to be an impactful presence on the edge. So it's not just Boubacar Traore, because we've seen it in 2022. Isaiah Foskey was a fantastic defensive end for Notre Dame, but he was kind of their only one. Everybody else was okay. Nana Osafo-Mensah was a productive player, but never really brought that true threat that Isaiah Foskey brought to the table. When you have an end room that's consisting of, on one side you get Boubacar, and then the other side, one of, Josh Burnham if he's healthy, Bryce Young, Logan Thomas, Cole Mullins, Junior Tuialamaka. Somebody else has to step up to be able to alleviate some of that pressure from Boubacar. So it's not just, okay, it's a 3rd down situation. If Boubacar gets home, we're in a good spot. But if he doesn't, we'll see what happens. I'm also hoping to see that this is kind of the game that Jason Onye really starts to come on. Because this was kind of at the point last season before, he had some off the field issues that he started to turn it up to. It was Notre Dame's 5th game. And we saw him make some impact plays against Arkansas, taking away that screen. But I'm hoping to see that this is the game that Jason Onye also really starts to come on. Because I like the rotation between him and Gabe Rubio, where it's like, okay, this series it's Gabe, this series it's Onye, and then you go back and forth. And if there's no drop-off in production in that, I think that's going to start to become a really effective interior duo. But that's going to cause Jason Onye to have to raise his level of consistency a little bit. But I think this is going to be a game where the defensive line has to step up. But, this defense is – I don't want to paint this picture that this Boise State offense is a juggernaut, but it is one, if you don't play sound, disciplined football, can jump on you. They return a lot of pieces from last season, and they didn't go 12-2 on accident. They didn't. And, yes, I know they don't have Ashton Genty anymore. But this is an offense that has pieces that can hurt you down the field, and we've watched this Notre Dame defense. Look, yes, their performance against Arkansas was fantastic. They're 2 weeks removed from giving up 23 first-half points to Purdue. I don't want to paint this picture. Oh, see what they did against Arkansas? There's no worries. We got to find somewhere in between because there's still steps that this defense has to make, truthfully. And if they're able to make them against Boise State and start stacking good performances, I'm going to feel more confident each week. And, Sean, I know you're going to feel the same. But, folks, that's going to do it for part 2 of today's show here on the Irish Breakdown podcast. But don't go anywhere. We're wrapping up today with a mailbag. So make sure you get those questions in. But before we get there, make sure you hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Make sure you hit that notification bell. Also, make sure you're subscribed to the CFB Nation channel. We're going live at 8 p.m. Eastern time tomorrow evening for the next installment of the spread option because there's going to be some really good football games on this weekend. We're going to be talking different lines, spreads. We're going to go through our locks and dogs of the week. But make sure you are subscribed to the CFB Nation channel so you know whenever we go live. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we'd greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. All right, Sean, to wrap up today, we have a mailbag on part 3 of the Irish Breakdown podcast brought to you by FanDuel. Now, if this does happen to be your first mailbag, make sure you put MB for mailbag, or you can put a little mailbox emoji that lets us know to set that question aside and we can make sure it gets answered. We can't go forever, so if you want to make sure that your question gets answered, you can always throw in a super chat, which we do actually have one to get us started out here, and it's from our guy, Nick. Thank you for the super chat, Nick. I want to thank all of you for your prayers and support through this rough patch. It was all worth it because I passed my real estate exam this morning and can start working. God is great. Go Irish. That's fantastic news, man. I'm happy to hear that for you. I really am. And hopefully that your next job is able to offer you a lot of good stuff. So very happy to hear that, man. That's awesome. It's really awesome. Got one in here from Irish English, and it is a buy-sell hold, something that we haven't had in quite some time. Sean, have we ever done a buy-sell hold together?
We got to do one.
We do.
That's on my Sean Tread bucket list.
Yep, there we go.
Got to do one. Got to do one.
Okay, buy-sell hold. Get out on the golf course. The bucket list it's a short list, but that's it. Mm-hmm. Golf course, buy, sell, hold. We'll keep adding to it. We'll figure some stuff out. All right, we got to get you down to Indy. I got to get up to Chicago.
Facts.
Okay, so there's 2 more.
That's 2.
Okay.
So I got to come down there around the draft.
Yep.
Or either Big Ten championship weekend, or we should go to the Big Ten championship game.
Ooh, now we're talking. Now we're
Notre
talking.
Notre Dame won't be playing.
Man, it would be nice to watch a football game and not have to stress about
it. Now, can I get an honest answer?
Yeah.
Is St. Elmo's really all that?
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Okay. All right.
It's good.
And I definitely have to hit St. Elmo's then.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. We'll go there. Do you like shrimp cocktail?
I actually do.
Yeah, they're known for their cocktail sauce.
I've heard. So, it's a little spicy. They have one that's a little spicy. Yeah.
Yeah. They're not afraid to throw some horseradish down in there, so it's not bad.
Yeah, all the guys would brag. All the media guys from Chicago would brag when they came back from covering the draft.
I'll have to. It's a hidden gem spot on the east side of Indianapolis, but it's one of mine and Lauren's favorite places to go eat. It's called His Place, and it's a soul food kitchen, and it is awesome.
Really,
bro, it's so good.
Okay,
best cream corn I've had, I think, ever.
Okay. Dude, the closest thing I get to like understanding Indianapolis culture is watching the 520 podcast. Because, dude, I'm like, okay, that's Indianapolis then. Okay. Mm-hmm. You know, just hearing those guys talk about the basketball culture and everything and growing up and knowing everybody. I'm like, Indianapolis is a pretty cool place. I actually, true story, how can I tell this? because it was a shocking story. It shocked me to death. So I grew up in South Side of Chicago, right? And so my dad says, we're going to see my great aunt today. So, pack your bags. I said, cool. I said, where are we going? He said, Indianapolis. So we pull up. I have no clue what side of Indianapolis it was. And we get out the car, walk up to the door, we knock on the door, and this fair skinned lady with long silver fox hair answers the door. And being the sixth grader that I was like, this is our aunt? Because she doesn't look like us. I'll just leave it like that. And that's when I learned like some of the branches on my family tree aren't exactly the same as me. And that was my introduction to Indianapolis. And we spent 2 days there. And great aunt, rest her soul, she was super cool. And she could cook soul food.
Okay.
That shocked me too. I'm like, wait a minute. You don't look like us and you can cook soul food? I was like, okay. So that is like my connection to Indianapolis. Like
I
my
love
family
that.
stays there. I've met some of my cousins as time is going on, but never really got a chance to explore the city.
Okay.
So we have to do that.
Well, we'll get you down here, man. Explore some of the fun parts of the city. Pacers games are always fun to go to down here too. It also helps when they're
Mhm.
better. But you
I
wouldn't
don't
go to
do
a
Pacers. I
what if
don't
they were
do
playing the
Pacers, man.
what if they were playing
Come
the
on, man.
Bulls?
The Bulls are terrible right now. No, you think I'm gonna go to a game so you can laugh at me and my team?
I wouldn't laugh at you. I'd laugh at the
You-
Bulls, but I wouldn't laugh at you. Oh man.
oh man,
No, that's
that'd
good.
be
Well, hey,
great.
we could check one of the things off the bucket list. Irish English put in a buy, sell, hold. So Sean, trick plays: buy one, sell one, hold one. The flea flicker, the fumble rooski, and the Statue of Liberty.
Flea flicker. Yeah, flea flicker. Say that 10 straight times.
No, I'm not even gonna try.
I know, right? I think, I saw Ben Johnson run the fake flea flicker
That was
against the
that was
Raiders.
sweet.
That was
Yep,
pretty cool. Yeah.
that was sweet. Yeah, I would buy flea flicker.
Yeah, I
I
agree.
would I would hold Statue of Liberty, and I'd probably sell the fumble rooski.
No.
Yeah.
I would go flea flicker, fumble Rooski, Statue of Liberty. Because I've seen the
Okay.
fumble Rooski work in national championship games. Crazy. I saw Nebraska do it against Miami. I forget the other game. And it's so cool because it's like the simplest play. Because I remember we actually went out and did it at the park. And I remember we were playing like another block up at the park. And they were like, yo, you can't do that. And we're like, that's in the rules, buddy. As long as the quarterback touches the ball and leaves it there, the center can go ahead and run with it. So, yeah, I like the fumble Rooski, man. I like the fumble Rooski.
No, that's fair. That's fair. I guess I get a little nervous around any trick play involving the football being on the ground.
Yeah,
I
that's
guess that's
understandable.
that's
That's
the one thing
understandable.
that makes me a little nervous. Plus, how you remember the fumble rooski in the national championship game, I remember the Statue of Liberty from that Boise State Oklahoma game.
Oh, with Zembrowski.
So I like that's kind of what triggered that for me. I was like, all right,
Yeah,
that's pretty sweet.
that was sweet though. It was the
I
way he
mean,
executed it too.
the entire way I mean, to force overtime, they ran a hook and ladder and then go for two in overtime to win it with a Statue of Liberty. That was nuts. But yeah, I mean, really, I love trick plays, but yeah, flea flicker I think takes the day for me. Got one in here from our guy Trevor Rocket, the guy with the awesome name. Sean, Trev, what do you two want to see this team come out and do on Saturday? Sean, what do you think?
I want to come out. Okay, my perfect start. I would actually want Boise State because I think every team now, if they win the flip, they're going to want to go on offense to go at Notre Dame and get out front. I want to see Notre Dame go 3-and-out. I want to see Notre Dame go 3-and-out. That's what I want. I want to see the Notre Dame defense established early on. We're going to be the dominant force today. Everybody's going to talk about us instead of the offense. Get a 3-and-out, and then just be consistent, man. That's what I really want to see. Because I have no doubt what we're going to see from the offense. None. I think we're going to continue to see an offense going up and down the field. And if they don't make mistakes, they're going to put up points.
Yeah, offensively, clean execution, take care of the football, get other pieces involved, some of the stuff that we talked about earlier in the show. And then defensively, I just want to see him be aggressive. This is an offense that you can absolutely take advantage of, flying downhill, bringing additional pressure, tight coverage. That's some of the stuff I want to see. And it doesn't have to exactly mirror what this defense looked like in 2024. But I do think that this should be a game where the defense plays a little bit more aggressive, Trev. That's what I want to see. Clean football, aggressive football, come out and handle business, check another game off the list, and then get ready for NC State. Yeah. I want this team to look very businesslike. There's going to be a lot of distractions in this game. First time Boise State ever comes to town, it's the green out, you're at home, you're going to be doing all this stuff, which I get and I love. With that being said, I want this team to come out and handle business because at the end of the day, they're the 21st ranked team in the country and they're 2-2. I want to make sure that this team comes out and handles business. Be aggressive on both offense and defense. I hope Marcus Freeman continues his mindset of, hey, offense, you guys can score against anybody. Go out and do what you got to do, and then keeps making corrections on defense. That's what I want to see.
Yeah.
Ultimately, at the end of the day. Got one in here from our guy, Pete Weber. Thank you, Pete. What's different between week 1 Boise State and week 5 Boise State? That's a good question, man. I mean, look, I think in week 1 against South Florida, they were an offense that was trying to figure out who they were without Ashton Jeanty, because that was the first stamp of offense that they've taken in 2 years without Ashton Jeanty being their starting running back. And I think you had a unit that was trying to figure out what their identity was without relying on number 2 to get the lion's share of touches on offense. Maddox Madsen is having to learn to kind of have to be that guy at quarterback, not just the game manager type. You know, you have weapons on the perimeter that I think are trying to learn how to be more effective in the game and not just rely on, okay, hammer Ashton Jeanty, Ashton Jeanty, Ashton Jeanty, Ashton Jeanty, and then I'm going to run free. So I think those are some of the things that's the bigger difference. And then on defense, man, you know, the defensive side's a little bit weirder for me, Sean, because Spencer Danielson's a defensive coach. Now, as a Notre Dame fan, I have sympathy when you have a defensive-minded head coach, but the defense struggles. I have some sympathy to that. But that one's a little bit more confusing for me. So I guess overall, Pete, that's what I would say. Offensively, they were trying to figure out what their identity is. Now, the next step in Boise State's evolution is you need people to step up and be playmakers. You need somebody to be that next Ashton Jeanty. Now, they're not going to put out the same level of production that he did, but you need somebody to kind of fill that void of, okay, when the game's on the line, who's going to step up? Against Oregon, it was Ashton Jeanty. Against UNLV, both times, it was Ashton Jeanty. Who's going to be that next guy? It could be somebody else in the backfield. Or it could be Latrell Caples. It could be Maddox Madsen. It could be Matt Lauder. Somebody's going to have to step up on that offense. And then defensively, I think that they just need to play a little bit more cohesively. They are a disciplined defense, but they have some holes in certain areas, and I think that they just need to play a little bit more, I guess, under control at times on the back end. That's where I look at Boise State being different from week 1 to week 5. What about you, Sean?
And for me, I just think for the coaching staff, it was always going to be a difficult task, right? And when you have a dynamic player like Ashton Jeanty, he affords you certain luxuries as a coaching staff that I don't think you have anymore. And then you have a veteran quarterback coming back, but he is who he is. He's not a guy that's about to elevate everybody else. He's not physically gifted in that way. He doesn't add to the run game. Be different if he could have added to the run game with his legs to be more dynamic, to be another piece of the offense evolving. And so the way defenses played them last year, now the coaching staff has to get used to not having everybody focused. Now the wide receivers don't have as much space because everybody else is focused on Ashton Genty and trying to stop Ashton Genty, right? So it is they're trying to fit, just like Notre Dame is trying to figure out who they are, but they found out pretty quickly, because they found out who they were offensively against Texas A&M. Like, it didn't take long. Hey, let's get the ball to 4 and 24, and we're going to be able to put up points. So I just think that that's the difference for them. And then I think they had the right opponents for them to kind of remedy some of the things that plagued them against South Florida, right? So, and I think that South Florida, they walked into an improved South Florida team, right? At home, opening night, and they're not equipped to come from behind. I think if they played South Florida again, they would have a good chance of beating South Florida. But once they got behind and you're not equipped to come from behind, like, what you need to do is run the ball. And once they got hit with a special teams play and the next domino fell and they had a couple of turnovers, it's like, who they are, they're not equipped to be able to overcome those things. And so that's, they have to be perfect or darn near perfect on Saturday. They really do. They have to be darn near perfect. I looked at the analytics over at teamrankings.com, and the analytics still say that Notre Dame is ranked 6th in the nation as far as their team. This is how the analytics, this is how they bear out. This is a top 10 team that they're going up against, despite the record. So they've improved, but as people in the chat and you pointed out, Trev, they really haven't. Appalachian State, anybody, you watched their Air Force game. I mean, it was a one possession game until they got that last big run to pull away and make it a double digit win. I mean, it was really back and forth, back and forth. Air Force would close within 5 and they would push back ahead. Air Force got it back within one possession and had a big third down to make a stop, and they couldn't make the stop. So, that just goes to show you that they've improved. They'll find out this week just how much they've improved. I will say this, though. We know Notre Dame can't lose any more games. This is a playoff elimination game for Boise State as well.
Oh, agreed.
Because if they win this game, this will be the best win by a G5 program.
Oh, yeah.
This would be the best win. They will have the best win over a big-time program in the G5. And so if they lose this game and they still win the Mountain West, I don't think they have a shot of getting into the college football playoff. So this is a playoff elimination game for them as well. So it's a lot on the line for Boise State. That's why I expect them to come out and play really hard. Like, I don't think they're going to go away. Like, Purdue and Arkansas kind of just faded at some point. But Boise State is going to play hard.
We talked about this yesterday, Sean, and I know you'll agree with this. This is the team that's not going to come into South Bend and flinch. Because they haven't. That hasn't been the program that Boise State is. With that being said, the last time they beat a Power 4 opponent on the road was 2019 against Florida State. And so there's some things that, Notre Dame is going to have to make sure that they take care of business against. But as long as they come in and Notre Dame plays their game, but you're right, Boise State is also in a playoff elimination game, and I'm interested to see what that does to this Boise State team, because they're going into a place that they're not going to be intimidated to play. Played in the Fiesta Bowl and against Oregon last season. This just isn't going to be a place where the moment is too big. So that'll be very interesting. Got one in here from Irish English. Our good friends at FanDuel do not even have Eli Raridan listed on the receiving props for this week. Trevor, what are we going to have to do to get your guys some respect around here? Look, man, I think that's a heck of a question. I do.
Trev, do they have, I'm sorry, can you bet someone? Can you pay to create a line for someone they don't have up? You can't do that?
Nope. Now you can do stuff. If they give you the option to bet on somebody, you can bet on somebody's like alternate receiving yards or alternate rushing yards. So like, for example, if Jeremiah Love's rushing yards was set at 50 yards for whatever reason, I could bet on him to have an alternate of like 75 rush yards. But Vegas has to produce the lines of players that you can bet on. You can't just say, I want to bet on this person. They have to be available to bet on, at least on FanDuel. So that's where that is, unfortunately.
Okay.
But yeah, it's interesting though. I know FanDuel that you can't. There's some other betting services that I believe that you can request to do it, I think.
Okay.
But right now I'm looking the receivers that you can bet on right now. For Boise State, you can bet on Matt Lauder or Latrell Caples. And for Notre Dame, you can bet on Jordan Faison, Malachi Fields, and Jeremiah Love. Jeremiah Love's over under receiving yards is set at 30.5, and that's juicy. That is something that I would be interested on for sure. But I'll say this.
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
No, you're good, man. I was going to say, I think most of the time come game time, especially in college, like NFL betting is different than college betting. College betting, I think, is still trying to find its footing a little bit. But I know like right before kickoff or like Friday night to Saturday morning, they start putting stuff out for like receptions, alternate receptions, like more props get available to you the closer we get to game time. So Irish English, I'm hoping that we can start betting on Eli Raridan about around Friday night, Saturday morning. I'm hoping so. Sean, what were you about to say?
The Notre Dame, looking at this, man, the Notre Dame first half point totals at 21.5.
I've already put in a parlay and I hit the over.
Oh, okay. I was about to say, like, yeah. Okay.
Yep. I won 3 different parlays on the Notre Dame Arkansas game last week. One of them was a first half only bet, and the only leg that didn't hit was the Jadarian Price anytime touchdown in the first half.
Mm-hmm.
And he scored on that. Like Arkansas was driving down the field, Adon Schuler punches out the ball, they recover. Notre Dame drives down the field, and they have that 35-yard dump off pass to Jadarian.
Yeah,
that's how that parlay hit. So
this might be one of those games where you hit the live bet, because if this is the type of game where Boise State hangs around and you could catch it at the right point, and then all of a sudden Notre Dame just goes 3 straight possessions,
yep,
and covers, yeah,
yep, we see that the same. Definitely see that the same. We got one in here from David Flores. Do you know if Jadon Blair has moved up on the depth chart? I would like to see him get into the playing rotation. Well, in the official depth chart that they release, he's still the 3rd string field safety, I believe, behind Tay Johnson and Jalen Stroman. But David, you and I are in the same boat. I would also love to see Jadon Blair in, because I think he is right now, he's your second best coverage safety in my eyes. Talent-wise, like he has a skill set to be. I mean, Adon Schuler is a fantastic safety, flying downhill, getting into the box, blowing up screenplays, making big hits. Tay Johnson, Sean, you and I talked about this last week. We thought that Tay Johnson being inserted into the starting lineup was going to allow Adon Schuler to return to playing who he plays like. The fly downhill safety, the attack downhill safety, and Tay Johnson is more the coverage safety. That's what made him such a good safety last year, playing alongside Xavier Watts. And then in the rest of the safety room, Jalen Stroman plays very similar to Adon Schuler. Luke Talich plays very similar to Adon Schuler and Jalen Stroman. So I would love to see Jadon Blair more in the rotation. I'm just hoping that gets freed up.
Look, I think Jadon Blair is in a situation where, man, you just Notre Dame went out. They got Jalen Stroman because they knew they were young on the back end. They knew they had to replace. And I understand the angst of why people would be hungry for Jadon Blair, especially, Jalen Stroman has made some mistakes early on that have led to some big plays. And I get it. But this is something we tell fans all the time, man. Let these kids just develop, man. Same thing with CJ. Stop throwing around first round this, first round. Can the kid just play? Can he just play and develop? It's pretty safe to say, if he plays well at Notre Dame, he's going to be a first round pick at quarterback. That's pretty safe to say. But can we just let him play, man? Just let Jadon Blair play. Let him develop. Everybody is not meant to be on the field freshman year. And when his time comes, which I'm pretty sure he'll decide with his play, that's one of the things I loved about Tate Johnson. Tate Johnson was like, yo, I was confident I could play last year when I was backing up. But, I got injured and I had to wait. And when my time came this spring, I took advantage of my time. Jadon Blair is going to play. You don't have to worry about that. He's going to be a major player on the Notre Dame defense over the next 2 to 3 years, or 3 to 4 years. You don't have to worry about that. Just give him time. Just give him time. He's going to get there, and his opportunity will come. His opportunity will come. Maybe it comes later this year. Maybe it comes in the springtime, but his opportunity is going to come.
Real quick here, Irish for Life. Any more update on Leonard Moore? Will he be available for the Boise game? I'm not sure if he's going to go. It's a good sign that he fully dressed for the Arkansas game. They just held him out right before kickoff. On the official depth chart that Notre Dame released, he's still questionable. And so I'm hoping to see him back, but also against this team and where this team is at right now, I think they showed that they can get wins without Leonard Moore. They were able to do it against Purdue, and they were able to do it against Arkansas. So I have confidence that Mark Zachary is going to be able to go and perform the way that he needs to if Leonard Moore is not deemed to go. I would rather have Leonard Moore back fully or as close to full health as you can for NC State and USC and not have him risk re-injuring that ankle or getting that ankle rolled up on against a Boise State, and then that just kind of pushes back his return even farther. It's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I agree. I think it speaks to the progression of Mark Zachary, and Mark Zachary has given this staff confidence that, we don't have to rush Leonard Moore back, and we have Christian playing really good in the boundary right now, gaining confidence. So it's really, you're getting Leonard Moore fully healthy. Mark Zachary's getting better, and Christian Gray is regaining confidence. It's really just a really good spot for them to be in. If it were USC this week, he probably plays.
Oh, 100%. Yeah, I think so too. If it was USC, if it was, I agree completely. Got one in here from our guy, Tristan Shout. Why is the AP poll garbage? I'm a Mizzou hater, but they need to be ranked higher than 19th. How is Bama ahead of Florida State? Who has Texas or Penn State beat to deserve that top 10? I just don't understand.
Most of those voters don't even watch games.
Yeah.
It's as simple as that.
I'll say this, Tristan. Unfortunately, this early in the season, we're still kind of witnessing, I guess, the effects of some teams being ranked where they were at in the preseason. Because the sample size is so small. I mean, the fact that Penn State and Texas have only played one Power 4 opponent through 4 games still just blows my mind. Absolutely blows my mind. But that's why. That's why Texas and Penn State are still in the top 10. Because, Penn State was the 3rd, 4th ranked team in the country when they played Oregon? I mean, it would be unrealistic for them to lose at home in overtime against another top 10 team, and then they go from 3rd to 15th. Now, if they would have gotten blown out, you could have that conversation. I'm not saying that I agree with this, by the way. I'm just thinking of how the voting system works. Again, not saying good or bad. It's just they wouldn't drop you that far. Why is Alabama ahead of Florida State? I understand the head-to-head conversation, but Alabama lost to Florida State, but then Florida State lost to an unranked Virginia team, who is a quality team. But Alabama picked up a win over Georgia, who hasn't lost at home in like 33 home games. They did that on the road. So that's just, it's where it all falls. I'm not saying I agree with it. That's just kind of how the ranking system works, because there's something like, why is Texas still ranked in the top? Well, they lost on the road by 7 points to the now number one team in the country, and they haven't lost since. Albeit they've played San Jose State, Sam Houston, and UTEP, and haven't really looked like world beaters since, but they're not going to go from 1 to 16th. So that's just kind of, unfortunately, that's just the world we live in with the voters. So that's just kind of where I'm at.
I will say this. There's no way Penn State should be in the top 10. I don't care. I don't care. It should be a lifetime achievement, no longer in the top 10 after that loss. Okay? Look, no more Krabby Patties for Squidward. We've seen enough. We've seen enough from James Franklin. And I said it last week. I'll say it again. You've allowed your quarterback to be your weak link on that team for 3 consecutive years. At this point, you should be embarrassed. He should be embarrassed. 3 straight years you're the weak link? Trev. 3 straight years we've been hearing, man, can Drew Aller, this is the time. Oh, his arm, he's got a big arm. He's a first-round talent. Dude. You're the weakest link, my man. And it was proven once again at home on the biggest stage. You can mark it down. Big game, Penn State in the clutch. We've seen it before. Drew Aller, interception late. Hey, where have we seen that before? Orange Bowl against Notre Dame. Mark it down. Just mark it down. No, they don't deserve. They don't deserve to be in the top 10. They just don't. I don't care if it was Oregon. No, let's be honest. Oregon was smacking you around. They were up 14. You were lucky to get back in the game. No. The offense stinks. And who have they played? Like you said, they haven't played anybody. And then they had a tough game at home against a MAC team, I think. It was kind of like tight. Look, I agree with you. These AP voters, they really don't watch games. They don't pay attention. You can argue the transitive property with the whole Florida State, Alabama thing. I think if you beat a team as convincingly as you did, it doesn't matter who they beat. When we played, we dominated you. That's enough for me. Some people don't see it the same way. As Trev said, Trev predicted that Virginia might pull that upset. They're much better. Tony Elliott doing a really good job. Right? So I think Missouri, yeah, I feel the Missouri. I feel that. But
that's just what's so tough, is because you get into the conversation of who deserves to be where. Yeah. And unfortunately, the deserves conversation is different than I guess, how the rankings play out. It's something that I've always disagreed with. But this goes into when people talk about how the preseason rankings don't matter. This is a prime example as to, yes, this is why they kind of do. Because depending on where somebody starts, they might not look the best. But if you put Penn State as a number 3 team in the country preseason and they don't lose, regardless of whether they play, they played Villanova, FIU, and the AP poll doesn't look at it the same way that the playoff poll does. And they don't really look at how you win. They just kind of look at, okay, well, they just haven't really lost since. They'll move teams depending on if a team below you has a more impressive win. I know that's kind of been the gripe with some fans sometimes. I mean, I've seen that happen to Ohio State. Ohio State will go beat, they'll be like the 3rd ranked team in the country one year or something.
Mm-hmm.
And I'll watch him beat Akron 64-0. But then the 5th ranked team in the country beats the 11th ranked team in the country. And then they'll just flip-flop Ohio State. So it's not that, it's more so what teams do around you that may be better. And then Penn State just kind of, they just hung around there until they played a team with equal or greater talent. And then they just got outplayed again on that big stage. So that's the unfortunate reality with the rankings is you have to have different conversations, whether you deserve or how it plays out. Again, not saying that I agree with it. That's just unfortunately where we're at, man. Here's another one from Irish for Life about the Boise State game. The over-under is 63.5. What are you guys picking?
Trev, you got a show to do. So don't give it away yet. You got a show to do. Trev can't do it right now because he has a show to do. You got to watch. Tell him where to watch, Trev, where you going to give it away.
Spread option, CFB Nation. Make sure that you guys tune in tomorrow night, 8 p.m.
There you go. You'll get Trev's answer tomorrow night. I'm gonna go with the under. And it won't be on Notre Dame. It won't be on. I don't think Notre Dame gets to 56 this week. I think they get to the 40s because I think they have less possessions. Because I think early on Boise State is going to try to slow the game down. However, I think Notre Dame has 2 back-to-back good defensive efforts. I think they have back-to-back, and I think it's Boise State that doesn't add to the total. So I think it's right under. It'll be right under that 63.5. It won't be under by much, but it'll be right under there.
Okay. I like that, Sean. I like that. All right, we got one in here from ND. It just means more. True or false? CJ Carr is a top 5 to 7 quarterback in the country so far this year.
I do. I have no problem with anyone that feels that way. I would say right now, yeah, I wouldn't. That range seems fair, and I don't think it would be overhyped to say he's playing at that level. I'm seeing it's fair, But in all fairness, you have to. Are we just looking at stats, or are we talking about how people are actually playing? Right? Because I think fair or unfair, the win-loss record is hung around the neck of the quarterback. It's just fair or unfair, right? So if you look, I would say before the injury, John Mateer would have been one of my top 5 quarterbacks. Man, Carson Beck is playing really good. He's playing really good football this year. So he would be one of those guys. Ty Simpson has really rebounded since that Florida State game. He's playing really good. Dante Moore is playing really good. Like I said, I'm sure I'm forgetting some guys, in the top 25 that are just really going out there putting up some really fantastic numbers.
I actually have some of those numbers for you, Sean.
Yeah, Gunnar Stockton actually was playing well until Aguilar is putting up some stats too at Tennessee. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, there's some quarterbacks out there that are playing really well. But that 5 to 7 range I can understand why somebody could debate that.
I put out an article the other day. My argument is CJ Carr is a top 5 quarterback in the country, and he's not 5th. And there's a bunch of different metrics that you can look at. And I know the record is, the blemish, the 2-2 record. And I think that's a fair conversation to have? But I think we can agree that you can have an argument about the first game against Miami. Notre Dame's offense did plenty to beat Texas A&M. So I don't put the record on CJ Carr. But again, fair or not fair to your point. But I went through and I broke down some numbers, and here's what they are, Sean. Notre Dame is the only team in the AP Top 25 who has yet to play a non-P4 opponent. Now, that's going to change on Saturday when they play Boise State. But not all G5 opponents are created equal. You know what I'm saying? Mm-hmm. So Notre Dame, through 4 games, is the only team in the top 25 that is yet to play a non-P4 opponent. They played Miami, Texas A&M, Purdue, and Arkansas. In those games, in total, CJ Carr has completed 68% of his passes, passed for 1,091 yards, 9 touchdowns, 2 picks, 1 rushing yard, 1 rushing touchdown. So it's unfair to compare who's, like stats against just P4 big picture because CJ Carr's played 4. And then on one spectrum, you have Drew Aller, who's played a game against the P4 opponent. Then you have other quarterbacks who have played 3. So I broke down their individual stats game by game. And so far against the Power 4, CJ Carr on average goes 18 of 26 for 273 yards, 2 touchdowns, and a half a pick based on his average. So then I started looking at some of the other quarterbacks across the country that people would put in contention that I would agree with that are in contention for the other, 4 spots in the top 5 in college football. I looked at quarterbacks like Julian Sayin. He's played 2 Power 4 games, Texas and Washington. His per game average, he goes 18 to 24 for 167 yards, has 1.5 touchdowns, and he takes care of the football well. He doesn't throw an interception. Dante Moore is another one of those quarterbacks. He's played 3 games against Power 4 teams, Oklahoma State, Northwestern, Penn State. He's gone 20 to 27 for 227 yards, throws 2.3 touchdowns a game and 0.3 interceptions. That's impressive. Arch Manning has played a game against a Power 4 opponent. He went 17 of 30, completed 56% of his passes for 170 yards, 1 touchdown, 1 pick. Carson Beck is another quarterback. Again, he's played 2 Power 4 teams, Notre Dame and Florida. His per game average in those Power 4 games is 19 of 30 for 183 yards and a touchdown. So it's one of those things where it's like, okay, once you start to dive into the numbers, CJ Carr is playing statistically like a top 5 quarterback in the country. So that is a very long roundabout way for me to say, yes, I think that CJ Carr is a top 5 quarterback in the country right now. Now, there's going to be things that he's going to have to continue to build on. We can also have a healthy conversation around, okay, are all P4 opponents created equal? I think Miami has a heck of a defense. I don't think Texas A&M or Purdue or Arkansas have a heck of a defense. So, there's stuff like that. You know what I mean? I think quarterbacks like Julian Sayin, his numbers will start to even out when the only 2 P4 opponents that he's played is Texas and Washington, a team who hasn't lost at home in 3 years. I think it'll start to even out. But those are some of the things that I think that you can look at when having these conversations.
And I mean, that's why, you look at numbers, and then I do think, and I talked to Brian about this, because to be objective, you have to say things and speak to them and don't worry about what others may think. So, like you said, 2 and 2. I agree. I don't think the record should only be put around the neck of the quarterback.
Sure.
But it's a reason why it is. From a business standpoint, there's a reason why they have to wear it. You know what I'm saying? Especially when you get to the next level. It's a reason why you have to wear that, because you're getting 50, 60 million a year. You're just going to have to wear that. Yeah, you have to get the blame, right? So, but from a college level, I said this, and I'm like, look, has nothing to do with whether or not he's top 5, whether or not it has nothing to do with blame. When it comes down to the fact, he turned the ball over in the 2 losses at key points of the game that led to points that changed the trajectory of the game. That's just a fact. That's a fact. Now, do you blame him for the loss? No. But that's something that actually took place in the midst of the game that had an effect on the outcome of the game. It wasn't the only thing that had an effect on the outcome of the game. But hey, we could go to Tyler Buckner. We can go to Christian Gray. We can point out a myriad of things that happened. But those things, those turnovers happen at important parts of the game. Now, for him, if he were in the Olympics and he was on the diving board, his level of difficulty would be far greater than most of the quarterbacks that are in the conversation because of the teams he faced out the gate. So that goes without saying. And he's a first-time starter. You have to include that contextually. But, I mentioned like Carson Beck's playing well, Dante Moore's playing well. I think Baron Morton for Texas Tech is playing well. Texas Tech is surprising everybody. Rocco Beck, once again, is doing his thing at Iowa State. Luke Altmaier is shocking me the way he's played. He had they had the disaster at Indiana, but he has to wear it as the quarterback. He has to wear that. He got blown out by Indiana. Heck, Mendoza. Well, he's played well, but we know he hasn't played anybody except for Illinois, and he played his tail off against Illinois. So, and then struggled against Iowa, but they struggled as an offense and a team against Iowa. But he came up with that clutch throw to Surratt to win the game. So I just think when you really take a step back, it's a lot of good candidates, and you can shuffle them any way you want to. And if CJ lands inside your top 5, then that's fine. If he lands inside your top 7, it makes sense. If he lands right outside your top 7, I understand that if you see other guys that have performed and have a better record, understand why you could put him on the periphery of the top 7. But like you said, he's not that far off. I wouldn't have him in my top 3 just because of the 2-2 record. Because that matters to me when it comes to quarterback play. I wouldn't have him in my top 3. I would definitely consider him top 5. I would right now. Because I think his level of difficulty far exceeds anybody else. Sure. Maybe other than Julian Sayin having to come out against Texas off the bat.
Yep, agreed. Because, the Texas offense has been a big disappointment. Their defense has been very good this year, I think. So, no, I get where you're coming from completely. And some of the stuff that we're talking about, Sean, is splitting hairs. You know what I mean? It's just win-loss stuff. In college especially, I don't put too much weight into just because it's so tough at that level. Because for the turnovers, I would also make the argument that CJ Carr also put them back in a position to win those games. And then there were some outside issues, to your point about you could name the losses on a number of different things. But I hear you. It's just tough to balance the win-loss thing versus, Drew Aller has a better record than CJ Carr as a starter in 2025. I'm not taking Drew Aller over CJ Carr. You know what I mean? So it depends on who you look at.
Come on, let's actually have somebody that should be part of the conversation. I'll give you 2 guys that are hard to judge because they're totally different than the guys we talked about. Like Thomas Castellanos is close to 1,100 total yards. They didn't lose to Virginia because of their offense.
Sure.
He put up numbers, right? So it hasn't like he struggled. Haynes King and what he means to Georgia Tech. Like he is so much put on his back every game. You want to talk about like level of difficulty? The pressure he has to perform every game, and it seems like he's about to literally break the pieces after every tackle.
Yeah.
I don't know what's holding the kid together right now.
Grit.
And he just goes out there and perform. Right, grit and just performs. So, but they're not your typical, they're not the same type of quarterback.
Sure.
That we've been talking about, your passers, but they do it in different ways. So how do you integrate them into the conversation of how guys are performing at the position? That's why I say, man, it's beauty is in the eye of the beholder. Because I wouldn't have a problem with someone having Castellanos in their top 5 or top 7, the way he's played early. And, so, yeah. I don't fight anybody. I fight for your quarterback. If you want to call him top 3, top 5, fight for him.
That's fair. I think that's a good segue into this question from John ES3. He watched Brady Quinn on another podcast earlier today. He stated that he wished Notre Dame had given CJ the start last year. He thought the team would have had as much success, if not more. What do you think? What do you think, Sean?
Oh, dude. We were screaming this from the mountaintop last year. Like, it was no need to go get Riley Leonard. Now, this, of course, was before Riley Leonard led them to a national championship berth. gave birth. But we were like, yo, let him play. And then this year, he'll be ready to go. And we felt like last year the schedule was such, but like, yo, it's a schedule with the talent you have. But I think the right decision was made. I do. Because I think it's not just CJ. Malachi Fields adds a totally different dimension. Totally different dimension, ladies and gentlemen. We can't, it's not just the fact that they've coached and developed CJ, they've given him bona fide number one, which a Notre Dame quarterback has not had in a long time. And for a young starter, every time he drops back, knowing I can depend on that guy to get open, or a 50-50 ball, I can just throw it up to him. Like, that is, you combine that with the run game, CJ is in a very comfortable position as a quarterback. Like, we talked about his level of difficulty with his first two games, but this, if you want to have optimal conditions for a first-time starter as a redshirt freshman, Notre Dame created it for him. They created it for him. So I was screaming to the rooftop like youngsters. But that's because, Trev, what I was a believer in what I saw in practice. I was immediately screaming, dude, that's the best arm talent in the room. Those two right there, right now. Best arm talent in the room. It's not even close. And then I had apprehension because of the injuries that Riley Leonard had. He didn't participate in the spring. And is he really going to be ready to go early in the season? Only having fall camp. And it was this supposed quarterback battle between him and Steve Angeli. And it's like, well, if he's splitting reps, didn't play in the spring, and then it's his first year in Mike Denbrock's offense, it was just a lot. But that would have been the same thing for the freshmen. If it was Kenny or CJ, that would have been their first year in the offense. So I think the right decision to allow them to have 2 years in the offense to learn, to grow, to develop, I definitely think I'm glad they made the decision. Because, I was just clamoring to see the talent. Right? And going back to the Jadon Blair mailbag, people, we just clamor to see the talent. And sometimes that talent is not ready, or the timing is not right for the talent to be put on full display. So they made the right decision.
Yeah, I mean, short answer to that question, man, I agree with everything that you said. It's a no from me. I love what CJ's done, but to your point, you have to look at what this offense is now. I think this is a better pass protecting offensive line than what it was last season. I mean, people forget Ashton Craig played 3 games last year. Billy Schrauth was hurt most of the year. Yeah, he came back, but he's even said that he wasn't 100% when he came back. It was Emil Wagner's first time starting. Anthony Knapp is a true. Look, for all the struggles that Anthony Knapp has had, he played better against Arkansas in pass protection. You wouldn't have gotten that version of Anthony Knapp last year. I love everything that Bo Collins did for Notre Dame. Answer the bell every single week. You're not going to convince me he's the same level of a pass catcher as Malachi Fields. Jordan Faison was hurt half the year. He wasn't the receiver that he is right now. Mitchell Evans, he's not athletic as what Eli Raridan is right now. And so, I think of games like Georgia. Riley Leonard was able to do things with his legs in that game that I don't think CJ or Kenny would have been able to do if they would have went with the young guys. And those are more so the games that I pay attention to than like the Northern Illinois game. You know what I mean? I think a lot of people hung their hats on, dude, you're telling me Steve Angeli or Kenny or CJ wouldn't have beaten Northern Illinois? They probably would have. But would CJ, Steve, or Kenny been able to rush for 80 yards against Georgia? Nope. But I don't think so. And so, those are kind of the differences that you have to see. I think Riley Leonard was the perfect leader for what that team needed last year. He was the only captain on offense. Yeah, this year I think he's more apt to have that supporting cast around him. talk about CJ. So, short answer, no, because I do think that Riley Leonard was the perfect quarterback that they needed for last year's team. But would I have been upset watching CJ kind of get his feet wet and he goes into year 2 as a starter this year? No. But do I think they make it as far? I don't know if they make it to the national championship game with a true freshman starting at quarterback with those weapons on the perimeter and that offensive line. So that's how it, but also a healthy conversation to have. Would Mike Denbrock have called things a little bit differently? I also think so too. So you can never tell, but short answer, it's no. Then last couple here, Sean, then we'll get out of here. Robert Bishop, can you guys answer why it seems that LSU always wears a white uniform, whether they are home or away? I think it's like, it's kind of like how the Cowboys are. Like whether the Cowboys play at home or away, they always wear their white jerseys. I think that's just kind of their default uniform to go to. And then I know on like some occasions they'll wear like the purple jerseys for their senior day, stuff like that. But Sean, do you have any other, I mean, is that just their preferential uniform?
I do know that certain schools or NFL teams, professional teams, go against the grain with their home uniforms. Some wear the darker uniforms at home, some wear the white uniforms at home, and vice versa on the road. So if you're going to face a team in the SEC that has a different color scheme, and even that they say we have all these combinations now. So maybe a team is wearing a colorway of their home version of their home jersey, and you're forced to wear a different jersey because it clashes. Because I think there's some type of, I forget what the rule is around jerseys, but there has to be a submission, and you have to let the opposing school know. I think it's like a certain amount of time out, like what you're going to wear, right? Like
That sounds
let's
right.
say, like if Notre Dame decided we're going to warm up in the blue uniforms and come out in the green jerseys, the opposing team has known, they've known. So, or they have to be told at some point. I forget the rule because I remember when I found out, I was like, "Yo, it's kind of interesting." But
Well, that's how it was with like the Shamrock series and stuff. Because whenever Notre Dame plays in a Shamrock series, like they're technically the home team, I think. But then you have like the years where they played out in Vegas where they had the all whites. So I think they had to let, who'd they play that year? BYU. They had to let them know. Yeah. They had to let them know, hey, we're going all white. So
we're going all white. Yeah.
Got one in here from Irish English. Hot take. Prove me wrong. Jadarian Price has been better than Jeremiah Love this season.
Better at what?
Yeah, I was just about to say.
Better at what?
I get where you're coming from on this. I do. I mean, Jadarian Price has averaged more yards per carry in 3 of the 4 games this season. I'm going to say what I said yesterday. And Sean, you can tell me if you agree or disagree with this. I think Jeremiah Love is their best player. I think Jadarian Price is their most natural, arguably best pure running back. There are things that Jadarian can do that Jeremiah Love can't. I think Jadarian Price has the best lateral cutting ability on the entire football team. I think he's a more patient runner. Jadarian is also not catching a flat route with his back to the defender, spinning out in the proper direction and scoring a touchdown.
Nope.
Jadarian Price is also not catching a one-handed wheel route and then stiff-arming a safety into the end zone. Like it's kind of like that thunder and lightning, but they're both lightning, So better pure runner, I think we can have a conversation, but just better in general, I would disagree. I think Jeremiah Love's skill set is a little bit more diverse. If you needed Jeremiah Love in some crazy scenario to just only go and play wide receiver, like let's just say half their wide receivers on the roster got hurt, God forbid, and you needed Jeremiah Love to go play slot receiver, he absolutely could. But if Jeremiah Love was hurt and you needed Jadarian Price to just go be a slot receiver, I think they would just ask Aeneas Williams to go be a slot receiver.
Yeah.
You know, so like that's how I look at this. Sean, do you disagree?
I think you explained it perfectly, right? Man, I'm not gonna use the word hate. I just don't like why are we arguing, man? For 2 straight years, two running back coaches have seen fit that the number one guy is Jeremiah Love. He's the best running back in the room. Jawan Sider took over, and to his word, he said, I don't understand why he's not on the field on third down. Your best player is supposed to be on the field on third down in clutch situations. And that's exactly what we've seen from Jeremiah Love this year. He's on the field more. So I'll tell you the best part of Jeremiah Love's game that I love watching this kid, man. He runs hard in between the tackles. I think it's underrated. I think it's very underrated how hard he runs in between the tackles and the extra yards he picks up after contact. And I think he can do that because he has been kept fresh by Dylan McCullough and now by Jawan Sider and the presence of Jadarian Price.
Agreed.
I think it's very underrated.
Yeah. I mean, I think Brian Ward in the chat said it best. The two make both better.
Yeah.
I think that is very well put. Very well put. Last two in here, Sean. Irish for Life 99 with Boise State having an effective and well-balanced offense. What is the single biggest key for Ash's defense? Stopping the run, preventing big plays. We talked about it a little bit earlier in the show, and it just comes down to playing aggressive, disciplined football. I mean, I know that's a really simple answer, but at the end of the day, so far, Notre Dame's defense in the secondary, they've let receivers go free and untouched. In some cases, completely uncovered. And then sometimes linebackers hit the wrong fit. They're not triggered to go fly and attack the football downhill. So I think that the linebackers need to play a little bit more aggressively, really aggressive overall. I think that's the single biggest key is continue to take another step of progression. We saw at times against Purdue, they were a little bit more aggressive, and then they were a little bit more aggressive against Arkansas. So can Chris Ash finally start putting it all together and let everybody off the leash? I think that's going to be a big key on Saturday. I think that's the single biggest one for this defense because then the talent takes over.
I'll just add to what you said, and I just think your players need to make plays. Yeah, this is where you're a more talented team. It's bigger than the play calls. I think Marcus Freeman said it best. Simply, it's 5 different ways you can play cover 2 and cover 3. We didn't ask them to do all 5 of those things or all 5 of those coverages. We kept it simple. And so once again, be simple. And if you're simple, let your guys go out and play fast. And your players need to make plays. If they make plays as the better team, they should be able to shut down a pretty one-dimensional Boise State offense when it really comes down to it.
Agreed. I'm with you. And then last one, Sean, from Casey MCC. Pick one player on offense and one player on defense who has a breakout game.
I mean, an easy one would be to pick. This is okay. Jaden Greyhouse's breakout. This is his breakout game. Going back to one of your picks, this could be Emil Wagner's breakout game. You know, not from a statistical standpoint, but just from the way he plays. This could be the game where you're like, yep, that's the Emil Wagner we've been waiting for. I think Tate Johnson could end up with an interception, turnover in this game. And then this is just one of those games where you get like Junior coming up with like 2 sacks or a sack and a half or something just random, right? Yeah, or it's like one of the big uglies getting like a fumble recovery for a touchdown or something crazy. just get that type of feel.
Yeah. On offense, I'll go, and at some point it's going to hit. Sean, you already talked about it because like I'm not going to pick one of the running backs. I'm not going to pick CJ Carr. I'm not going to pick Raritan, Faison, or Fields. At some point, if I keep picking Jaden Greathouse to have a breakout game, it's just going to happen. And then I'm going to tell everybody that I was right and I picked it earlier in the week. So on offense, I'm going to go Jaden Greathouse. And then on defense, I'm stuck between two. So I'll give you both. First one's Bryce Young. This is a game where I could see just his athleticism and natural God-given ability take over. These are quality tackles, like I said. But I think that Boubacar is going to be going up against Cage Casey most of the day. I really think that Bryce Young athletically can have a really good game against their right tackle. I do. And then the other player for me is Kingston Biliamasa. Now, we can have a debate on if he's already broken out, and I think that's fair, but I could see him having a game where he could end with an interception, and then he could also end with a sack. He's all over he's getting pressure on the quarterback, so I could see this being one for him. But if you only made me pick one, I'd go Bryce Young with a breakout. So, well, listen, folks, that's going to do it here for us today on the Irish Breakdown Podcast. Here in about a half an hour, the guys are going live on IB Nation Sports Speak for their midweek mailbag. So if you want to get more mailbag action in, be sure to hop on over and give the guys a listen around 5:05 p.m. Tomorrow, Brian and I are going to be back. We're going to be talking keys to victory. We're going to give our game predictions, game records, and then we're going to preview some other games going on around college football. But until then, on your way out of here, be sure to hit that like button. Make sure you're subscribed to this channel. Hit that notification bell so you know whenever we go live. Whatever streaming platform you listen to us on, we would greatly appreciate a 5-star review. But as always, the best way to support what we do here is subscribe to the premium message boards at boards.irishbreakdown.com. So until next time, that's Sean. I'm Trevor. We'll see you back here very soon on the Irish Breakdown Podcast.